Arizona Cardinals, 2008 season, 9-7. This wasn't the best regular season, but it was the Cardinals' best run, and it nearly ended in a championship. In 2008, the Arizona Cardinals went just 9-7 in the regular season, barely winning the NFC West, but once the playoffs started, they caught fire. Behind a resurgent Kurt Warner, dominant performances from Larry Fitzgerald, and a surprisingly tough defense, they became the underdog story of the year. Fitzgerald went on one of the greatest postseason runs ever by a wide receiver, racking up 546 yards and 7 touchdowns in 4 games. The Cardinals knocked off the Falcons, Panthers, and Eagles to reach Super Bowl 43, the franchise's first ever. In the Super Bowl, they went toe-to-toe with the Steelers. Down late, Warner and Fitzgerald connected on a 64-yard go-ahead touchdown that felt like the perfect ending. But Pittsburgh answered with a last-minute drive, capped by Santonio Holmes' iconic toe-tap catch in the corner of the end zone. They didn't win the title, but they changed the way people viewed Cardinals football. That 2008 team didn't just overachieve. They gave Arizona its most unforgettable season in modern NFL history. Atlanta Falcons, 2016, 11-5. This was the year everything clicked until it didn't. In 2016, the Atlanta Falcons had the #1 scoring offense in the NFL, with Matt Ryan putting together an MVP season and Julio Jones at the peak of his powers. They averaged 33.8 points per game and steamrolled through the playoffs, dropping 36 on Seattle and 44 on Green Bay to reach Super Bowl 51. Offensive coordinator Kyle Shanahan dialed up a perfect system. Devonta Freeman and Tevin Coleman made up a versatile backfield. The offensive line was dominant, and Ryan threw for 4,944 yards, 38 touchdowns, and just 7 interceptions. Then came the Super Bowl. Atlanta stormed out to a 28-3 lead over the New England Patriots. For 2.5 quarters, it looks like a coronation. But in one of the most painful collapses in sports history, the Falcons gave up 31 unanswered points and lost in overtime. It was devastating, but it was still the most complete team the Falcons have ever had. Explosive, innovative, and just 1 or 2 plays away from immortality. The heartbreak still lingers, but so does the greatness. No Falcons season ever reached those heights or fell from them so sharply. Baltimore Ravens, 2000, 12-4. This wasn't just the Ravens' best season, it was one of the most dominant defensive seasons the NFL has ever seen. In 2000, the Baltimore Ravens finished 12-4, but it wasn't because of a high-powered offense. In fact, they went 5 straight games without scoring a single offensive touchdown midseason, and still made the playoffs comfortably, because their defense was historic. Led by Ray Lewis, the Ravens allowed just 165 points across 16 games, the fewest ever in a 16-game season. They gave up only 970 rushing yards total, forced 49 turnovers, and shut teams down at every level. They didn't bend, and they never broke. In the playoffs, they took it up another notch. They beat the Broncos, Titans, and Raiders while giving up a combined 16 points. And in Super Bowl 35, they smothered the New York Giants, allowing just 152 total yards and scoring a defensive touchdown in a 34-7 rout. Trent Dilfer managed the offense, Jamal Lewis powered the run game, and the defense handled the rest. It was old school, smash-mouth football at its finest. The 2000 Ravens didn't just win the Super Bowl. They left no doubt. No Ravens team, before or since, has ever been more feared. By the way, I'm going to be posting a lot here, so it would mean a lot if you subscribed and dropped a like for the algorithm. Buffalo Bills, 1990, 13-3. This was the year the Bills became a juggernaut and launched one of the greatest runs in NFL history. In 1990, Buffalo went 13-3, led the league in scoring, and looked unstoppable on both sides of the ball. Jim Kelly ran the no-huddle K-gun offense with surgical speed, spreading defenses thin and letting his weapons go to work. With Thurman Thomas, Andre Reed, and James Lofton, the Bills could beat you any way they wanted. They outscored opponents by 165 points during the regular season, then obliterated the Dolphins and Raiders in the playoffs, including a 51-3 blowout in the AFC Championship game that still stands as one of the most lopsided in postseason history. Then came Super Bowl 25, a classic showdown with the New York Giants. It was a battle of styles, Buffalo's high-octane offense versus the Giants' ball-control defense. The game came down to the final seconds, and with the Bills trailing 20-19, Scott Norwood's 47-yard field goal attempt sailed wide right. It was heartbreak, but it was also the beginning. This season kicked off 4 straight Super Bowl appearances for Buffalo, a stretch of dominance no AFC team has matched since, and while they didn't win it all, the 1990 squad was the most complete, explosive, and balanced team they ever fielded. They were one kick away from football immortality. Carolina Panthers, 2015, 15-1. This wasn't just the Panthers' best season, it was a cultural moment. In 2015, Carolina went 15-1, steamrolled the NFC, and did it all with swagger, smiles, and Superman celebrations. At the center of it all was Cam Newton, who won NFL MVP after throwing for 35 touchdowns, rushing for 10 more, and becoming one of the most electrifying players the league had ever seen. The Panthers had the #1 scoring offense and the #6 scoring defense. They led the league in turnover margin, were nearly unbeatable at home, and won games by an average of 2 touchdowns. But it wasn't just stats, it was the energy. Cam dabbed after touchdowns, the defense fed off the crowd, and every week it felt like Carolina was playing their own brand of football, fast, fearless, and fun. They crushed the Seahawks and Cardinals in the playoffs, punching their ticket to Super Bowl 50. But there, the momentum stopped. Facing a relentless Denver Broncos pass rush, led by Von Miller, the Panthers were held to just 10 points and lost 24-10. It was a frustrating ending, but it didn't take away from the season's magic. For 4 months, the Panthers were untouchable. And for one unforgettable year, Cam Newton was the face of the entire league. No Panthers team before or after has ever reached that level. Chicago Bears, 1985, 15-1. This wasn't just the Bears' best season, it's one of the most iconic teams in NFL history. In 1985, the Chicago Bears finished 15-1 and fielded a defense so dominant, it changed the way football was played. Buddy Ryan's 46 defense attacked from every angle, confusing quarterbacks and overwhelming offensive lines. Led by legends like Mike Singletary, Richard Dent, Dan Hampton, and William the Refrigerator Perry, they allowed just 12.4 points per game and forced 54 turnovers. On offense, they weren't flashy, but they didn't need to be. Walter Payton anchored the ground game, and quarterback Jim McMahon brought leadership and just enough chaos to keep things interesting. Even the team's personality became a storyline. They filmed the Super Bowl Shuffle before the playoffs even started, and they backed it up. In the postseason, the Bears shut out both the Giants and Rams, then crushed the Patriots 46-10 in Super Bowl 20. It was a complete demolition. 7 sacks, 6 turnovers, and a defensive touchdown. No team since has combined dominance, charisma, and intimidation quite like the '85 Bears. They didn't just win the Super Bowl. They became the gold standard for what an all-time great defense looks like. Cincinnati Bengals, 1988, 12-4. This was the season the Bengals came within seconds of winning it all. In 1988, Cincinnati went 12-4 and had the most balanced, explosive offense in franchise history. Quarterback Boomer Esiason won NFL MVP, guiding a no-huddle offense that kept defenses on their heels. With Ickey Woods bulldozing defenses and James Brooks adding versatility out of the backfield, the Bengals were nearly unstoppable. They scored 28 or more points in 10 games, cruised through the AFC, and rode that momentum into the playoffs. After beating the Seahawks and Bills at home, they advanced to Super Bowl 23 to face the San Francisco 49ers. The game was tight the whole way. With just over 3 minutes left, Cincinnati held a 16-13 lead. They were one defensive stop away from their first Super Bowl win. But then came Joe Montana. In one of the most iconic drives in NFL history, Montana led the 49ers 92 yards down the field, hitting John Taylor for the game-winning touchdown with 34 seconds left. It was heartbreak, but it didn't erase the season's brilliance. The 1988 Bengals were fast, physical, and forward-thinking, and even though they came up just short, it remains the most complete team the franchise has ever fielded. Cleveland Browns, 1986, 12-4. This was the closest the Browns have come to a Super Bowl, and the peak of their modern era. In 1986, Cleveland went 12-4 behind breakout quarterback Bernie Kosar, a punishing run game with Kevin Mack and Ernest Biner, and a physical, opportunistic defense. They controlled the AFC Central, won tough road games, and built a team that could win in any weather, especially important in December in Cleveland. Kosar threw for over 3,800 yards, the defense racked up 62 sacks, and Marty Schottenheimer's team played with toughness and discipline every week. They earned the AFC's number one seed, and hosted the New York Jets in the divisional round, a game that went down to the wire. Cleveland pulled off a wild comeback win in double overtime, the longest playoff game since the AFL-NFL merger, and advanced to the AFC Championship game against the Denver Broncos. That set the stage for one of the most infamous moments in franchise history, the drive. With 5:32 left, John Elway led the Broncos 98 yards down the field to tie the game. Denver went on to win in overtime, 23-20, crushing Cleveland's Super Bowl hopes. But even with the heartbreak, 1986 marked the high point of the Browns' Super Bowl-era legacy, a team with star power, grit, and real championship potential. They were one defensive stop away from rewriting history. Dallas Cowboys, 1992, 13-3. This was the beginning of a dynasty and the most important season in modern Cowboys history. In 1992, Dallas went 13-3 under head coach Jimmy Johnson, with a roster that was young, loaded, and built to dominate for years. Quarterback Troy Aikman had fully matured into a franchise leader. Running back Emmitt Smith led the league in rushing touchdowns, and Michael Irvin gave them a true number, one wideout who could win every big moment. But it wasn't just about the stars. The offensive line, led by Larry Allen, Mark Tuinei, and Nate Newton, was already becoming legendary. And the defense, powered by Charles Haley and Ken Norton Jr., was fast, physical, and suffocating. They finished the regular season with the number one ranked defense in both yards and points allowed, then blew out the Eagles and stunned the 49ers in the NFC Championship game, handing San Francisco their first home playoff loss in a decade. Then came Super Bowl 27, where Dallas crushed the Buffalo Bills 52-17. They forced 9 turnovers, including 2 defensive touchdowns, and announced to the world that a new superpower had arrived. This was the Cowboys' most complete team. It wasn't just about winning, it was about launching a run that would define the entire 1990s. And it all started with 1992. Denver Broncos, 1998, 14-2. This wasn't just the Broncos' best season, it was the perfect ending to a Hall of Fame career. In 1998, Denver went 14-2, led by a 38-year-old John Elway and a prime Terrell Davis, who rushed for 2,008 yards and won NFL MVP. The offense was balanced, explosive, and perfectly orchestrated by head coach Mike Shanahan. With Rod Smith, Ed McCaffrey, and Shannon Sharpe in the passing game, the Broncos could beat defenses in every way imaginable. They started the season 13-0, bulldozing opponents with an offense that averaged nearly 31 points per game. The defense, led by Steve Atwater and Bill Romanowski, played fast and physical, giving them just enough edge to control the tempo on both sides. In the playoffs, they cruised past the Dolphins and Jets, then faced the Atlanta Falcons in Super Bowl 33. Coached by Elway's former boss, Dan Reeves, Denver dominated, winning 34-19, with Elway throwing for 336 yards and rushing for a touchdown in his final NFL game. He walked off the field a champion, again, and this time there was no more debate. The 1998 Broncos weren't just better than their 1997 title team. They were the most complete team in franchise history, and they gave Elway the fairy tale ending he earned. Detroit Lions, 2023, 12-5. This wasn't just the Lions' best season of the Super Bowl era. It was the most meaningful in franchise history. In 2023, Detroit went 12-5, won the NFC North for the first time ever, and hosted their first home playoff game since 1993. But this team wasn't about breaking curses. It was about rewriting the narrative. Led by Dan Campbell, the Lions were fearless, physical, and unapologetically aggressive. Jared Goff played the best football of his career. Amon-Ra St. Brown became a star, and rookie Jahmyr Gibbs gave the offense explosive versatility. Behind one of the league's best offensive lines, Detroit controlled games from the trenches. On defense, Aiden Hutchinson emerged as a dominant force, and the unit got stronger as the season went on. In the playoffs, the Lions beat the Rams in a highly emotional wild-card win, their first postseason victory since 1991. Then, they took down the Buccaneers to reach the NFC Championship game, where they jumped out to a shocking 24-7 halftime lead. Over the 49ers, it looked like destiny, until it wasn't. San Francisco stormed back in the second half, and the Lions fell just short of the Super Bowl, but the impact was already felt. 2023 wasn't just a great season, it was a cultural reset. The Lions became a national story, a team fans believed in, and proof that decades of losing can be undone in one unforgettable year. Green Bay Packers, 2010, 10, and 6. This wasn't their most dominant regular season, but it's the year they ran the table when it mattered most. In 2010, the Packers went 10 and 6, barely squeaked into the playoffs as the 6th seed, and then did the unthinkable, won 3 straight road playoff games, and hoisted the Lombardi Trophy on the biggest stage. It all started with Aaron Rodgers, who was in complete command of the offense. He threw for over 3,900 yards and 28 touchdowns in the regular season, but he turned it up another level in the postseason. He carved up defenses with pinpoint accuracy, mobility, and poise, including a near-perfect performance against the Falcons in the divisional round. The defense, led by Clay Matthews, Charles Woodson, and B.J. Raji, was opportunistic and physical, forcing turnovers, generating pressure, and getting key stops when needed. In Super Bowl 45, the Packers faced the Pittsburgh Steelers and jumped out to a 21-3 lead. The game tightened late, but Rodgers stayed calm, throwing for 304 yards and 3 touchdowns to earn Super Bowl MVP honors and deliver Green Bay's 4th Super Bowl title. It wasn't a 13-win juggernaut. It was a team that got healthy, hot, and locked in at the perfect time. The 2010 Packers showed that sometimes the best season isn't the cleanest. It's the one where you finish the job. Houston Texans, 2011, 10 and 6. This was the season the Texans finally broke through. In 2011, Houston went 10 and 6 and made the playoffs for the first time in franchise history. After years of mediocrity and near misses, they put together a complete team with a dominant ground game, a rising defense, and just enough resilience to survive major setbacks. They lost starting quarterback Matt Schaub to injury midseason, then lost backup Matt Leinart, but third-stringer TJ Yates stepped in and kept the team afloat, leaning on the Texans' biggest strength, Arian Foster and Ben Tate, who combined for over 2,100 rushing yards. On defense, new coordinator Wade Phillips completely transformed the unit. J.J. Watt was a rookie. Brian Cushing, Connor Barwin, and Antonio Smith made up one of the NFL's toughest front sevens. They finished the season ranked 2nd in total defense. In the playoffs, the Texans beat the Bengals in the wild card round, with Watt returning an interception for a touchdown in one of the franchise's most iconic moments. They nearly pulled off an upset against the Ravens in the divisional round, but came up just short. Still, 2011 marked a turning point. It was the first time the Texans weren't just in the league, they were part of the conversation. And even though later teams won more games, this was the season that changed everything. Indianapolis Colts, 2006, 12 and 4. This wasn't Peyton Manning's flashiest season, but it was the one that finally silenced every doubt. In 2006, the Colts went 12 and 4 behind Manning's precision passing, Marvin Harrison's route running mastery, and Reggie Wayne's big play ability. Joseph Adai gave them a strong running presence, and the offense finished top 3 in scoring yet again. But for years, the knock on the Colts was the same. Can they win in January? They had lost heartbreaking playoff games to New England and Pittsburgh in the years prior, and 2006 felt like their window might be closing. Then, everything changed. Despite struggling against the run during the regular season, the Colts' defense, led by Bob Sanders, Dwight Freeney, and Robert Mathis, flipped the switch in the playoffs. They shut down Larry Johnson in the wild card round, picked off Steve McNair in the divisional, and then faced the ultimate test, Tom Brady and the Patriots in the AFC Championship. Down 21-3, Manning led the biggest comeback of his career, finishing with 349 yards and a trip to the Super Bowl. 2 weeks later, they defeated the Chicago Bears 29-17 in Super Bowl 41, giving Indianapolis its first championship since the Baltimore days, and giving Manning the validation his career needed. 2006 wasn't their most dominant team, but it was the year they finally finished the job. Jacksonville Jaguars, 1999, 14-2. This was the most talented and well-rounded team the Jaguars have ever put on the field, and the closest they've ever come to a Super Bowl. In 1999, Jacksonville went 14-2, earning the best record in the NFL and the top seed in the AFC. Mark Brunell led the offense with poise. Jimmy Smith and Keenan McCardle formed one of the league's most underrated receiving duos, and Fred Taylor was in his prime, explosive, physical, and unstoppable when healthy. But the real surprise came on defense. The Jags finished with the number 4 defense in the league, thanks to impact players like Tony Brackens, Donovan Darius, and Kevin Hardy. They held opponents to just 13 points per game, forced turnovers at a high rate, and dominated time of possession. After beating the Dolphins 62-7 in the divisional round, the final game of Dan Marino's career, the Jaguars were 1 win away from the Super Bowl. But there was one problem: the Tennessee Titans. Tennessee had already handed Jacksonville its only 2 losses during the regular season, and in the AFC Championship, they did it again. The Jags led 14-10 at halftime, but the Titans outscored them 23-0 in the second half and ended Jacksonville's dream season. It was the most complete team in franchise history, and one of the best NFL teams to never reach a Super Bowl. 1999 was as close as they've ever come. Kansas City Chiefs, 2019, 12-4. This was the year the Chiefs finally broke through and started building a modern dynasty. In 2019, Kansas City went 12-4, led by Patrick Mahomes in his second season as a starter. While Mahomes' numbers dipped slightly from his MVP campaign the year before, he was smarter, more efficient, and more dangerous when it mattered most. But it wasn't just him. Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, and Mecole Hardman gave Mahomes a track team at receiver. Damian Williams added burst to the backfield, and the defense under new coordinator Steve Spagnuolo finally turned the corner, with Tyrann Mathieu, Chris Jones, and Frank Clark stepping up in the postseason. After falling behind 24-0 to the Texans in the divisional round, the Chiefs exploded for 51 points, erasing the deficit in a single quarter. They followed that up with a comeback win over the Titans in the AFC Championship, earning their first trip to the Super Bowl in 50 years. In Super Bowl 54, they faced the 49ers and entered the fourth quarter down 20-10. But Mahomes delivered, engineering 3 straight touchdown drives to win 31-20 and capture Kansas City's first Lombardi trophy since 1970. It wasn't just about winning a title. It was about changing the identity of the franchise. 2019 made the Chiefs a destination, Mahomes a legend, and Kansas City a threat for years to come. Las Vegas Raiders, 1983, 12-4. Then known as the Los Angeles Raiders. This was the most dominant team in franchise history, and the last time the Raiders reached the NFL mountaintop. In 1983, the Raiders went 12-4 and steamrolled their way to a Super Bowl 18 title. Led by head coach Tom Flores, this team had everything: physicality, speed, attitude, and one of the best playoff runs the league had ever seen. Quarterback Jim Plunkett managed the game with poise, while Marcus Allen gave them a true superstar. Allen rushed for over 1,700 total yards that season, then delivered one of the greatest performances in Super Bowl history, including his legendary 74-yard touchdown run, where he reversed field and outran the entire Washington defense. On defense, the Raiders were violent and opportunistic. Howie Long, Lyle Alzado, and Matt Millen anchored a unit that played fast and mean. They forced turnovers, controlled the line of scrimmage, and set the tone every Sunday. In the Super Bowl, they dismantled the defending champion Washington Redskins 38-9, holding an offense that had scored a then-record 541 points in the regular season to just one touchdown. The 1983 Raiders didn't sneak into a title. They earned it, with power, speed, and swagger that defined an era. It remains the last time the franchise won it all, and still stands as the peak of Raider greatness. Los Angeles Chargers, 1994, 11-5. Then known as the San Diego Chargers. This was the Chargers' breakthrough season, and the only time they've ever reached the Super Bowl. In 1994, San Diego went 11-5 under head coach Bobby Ross, led by a scrappy, overachieving roster that played tough, physical football. Quarterback Stan Humphries managed the offense efficiently, while running back Natrone Means powered his way to over 1,300 rushing yards, giving the team its offensive identity. But it was the defense and special teams that made this team dangerous. Linebacker Junior Seau was the heart and soul of the franchise, flying around the field, making clutch plays, and setting the tone with unmatched energy and leadership. The Chargers didn't blow teams out. They wore them down. In the playoffs, they edged out the Dolphins and then stunned the Steelers in the AFC Championship, holding strong at the goal line in the final seconds to secure a 17-13 victory. It sent San Diego to Super Bowl 29, the first in franchise history. There, they ran into a buzzsaw, the 49ers at their peak. Steve Young threw 6 touchdown passes, and the Chargers lost 49-26. But the 1994 season still stands as the high watermark for the franchise. It was gritty, it was gutsy, and it proved that San Diego could hang with the league's best. No Chargers team has gone further, or meant more to the city. Los Angeles Rams, 1999, 13-3. This wasn't just the Rams' best season. It was the birth of the greatest show on turf. In 1999, the Rams went 13-3 and shocked the league with an offense that looked like it came from the future. They were fast, aggressive, and relentless, scoring 526 points, the most in the NFL that year. And it all started with a backup quarterback no one saw coming. Kurt Warner, a former grocery store stalker and Arena League standout, stepped in after an injury to Trent Green and immediately became a star. He threw for 41 touchdowns and won NFL MVP, running head coach Dick Vermeil's high-flying offense to perfection. With Marshall Faulk in the backfield, Torrey Holt, Isaac Bruce, and Az-Zahir Hakim at receiver, the Rams could score in seconds, and often did. On defense, they were underrated. Led by Kevin Carter, London Fletcher, and Todd Light, they forced turnovers and pressured quarterbacks, giving Warner and company even more chances to light up the scoreboard. In Super Bowl 34, they faced the upstart Titans. The Rams built a 16-0 lead, but Tennessee came storming back. With the game tied 16-16 and the clock winding down, Warner hit Bruce for a 73-yard touchdown. Then, on the final play, linebacker Mike Jones made one of the most iconic tackles in NFL history, stopping Kevin Dyson 1 yard short of the end zone. The Rams won 23-16 and finished one of the most exciting and explosive seasons the league had ever seen. 1999 wasn't just the Rams' best season. It changed what we thought an offense could be. Miami Dolphins, 1972, 14-0. This isn't just the Dolphins' best season. It's the only perfect season in NFL history. In 1972, Miami went 14-0 in the regular season, then won 3 straight playoff games, including Super Bowl VII, to finish 17-0, a record no team has ever matched. What made it so remarkable was how complete and how balanced they were. The offense, led by Bob Grease and Earl Morrall, didn't light up the stat sheet, but it didn't have to. The backfield tandem of Larry Csonka, Mercury Morris, and Jim Keek formed a 3-headed rushing attack that wore down defenses and controlled the clock. But the real identity of the team was its defense, famously nicknamed the no-name defense. They didn't have a ton of stars, but they had cohesion, discipline, and a head coach in Don Shula who knew exactly how to maximize every unit. The Dolphins beat Washington 14-7 in Super Bowl VII, sealing the perfect season. The only blemish? A missed field goal that prevented a shutout. Other teams have come close. The 2007 Patriots went 18-0 before losing in the Super Bowl, but none have finished the job. That's why the 1972 Dolphins aren't just the best team in franchise history. They're one of the most iconic teams in all of football. Minnesota Vikings, 1998, 15-1. This was the most explosive team the Vikings have ever fielded, and one of the greatest offenses the NFL has ever seen. In 1998, Minnesota went 15-1, set a then NFL record with 556 points, and made it look easy. Veteran quarterback Randall Cunningham had a career renaissance, throwing for 34 touchdowns, while Robert Smith added over 1,000 yards on the ground. But the real spark came from a rookie, Randy Moss. With unmatched speed, size, and deep ball ability, Moss exploded for 1,313 yards and 17 touchdowns, stretching defenses and opening everything underneath for Chris Carter and tight end Jake Reed. No team had answers. Every week, Minnesota ran up the score and didn't slow down. Defensively, they were sound too, with John Randall anchoring the pass rush and Ed McDaniel leading the linebacking core. They had playmakers at every level. They cruised through the regular season, dismantled the Cardinals in the divisional round, and hosted the NFC Championship against the Atlanta Falcons. Late in the game, up 27-20, kicker Gary Anderson, who hadn't missed a single kick all year, missed a 38-yard field goal that would have iced it. The Falcons tied it, sent it to overtime, and won. Just like that, the Vikings' dream season ended one game short of the Super Bowl. 1998 wasn't just their best shot, it was lightning in a bottle. A perfect storm of talent, play calling, and dominance. That just didn't finish. New England Patriots, 2007, 16-0. This was the most dominant regular season in NFL history, and the closest any team has come to perfection since the 1972 Dolphins. In 2007, the Patriots went 16-0, becoming the first team to complete a perfect regular season in the 16-game era. They didn't just win, they overwhelmed. Their average margin of victory was nearly 20 points per game, and at times, it felt like they were playing a different sport. Tom Brady was in full command, throwing a then-record 50 touchdown passes, with 23 of them going to Randy Moss, who had just arrived in New England and instantly became uncoverable. The offense, with Wes Welker, Dante Stallworth, and Lawrence Maroney, was the most efficient in the league. On defense, they were loaded with veterans like Teddy Bruschi, Asante Samuel, Vince Wilfork, and Rodney Harrison. They didn't bend, they didn't break, they just suffocated teams and gave the ball back to Brady. They blew through the playoffs, beating the Jaguars and Chargers to reach Super Bowl 42, where they were heavy favorites against the New York Giants. Then, the unthinkable happened. The Giants pressured Brady all night, and with less than 3 minutes left, Eli Manning escaped a sack and hit David Tyree for the now famous helmet catch. The Giants scored the go-ahead touchdown soon after, and New England's perfect season was gone, just 35 seconds from immortality. It ended in heartbreak. But the 2007 Patriots remain the most feared, unstoppable version of the franchise, and arguably the greatest team to never win it all. New Orleans Saints, 2009, 13-3. This wasn't just the Saints' best season, it was the year they rewrote their legacy. In 2009, New Orleans went 13-3, powered by the league's most dynamic offense and a defense that finally knew how to close games. Drew Brees was at his absolute peak, throwing for 4,388 yards and 34 touchdowns, leading an attack that averaged 31.9 points per game, best in the NFL. Brees had weapons everywhere. Marquez Colston, Devery Henderson, Robert Meacham, and Reggie Bush, with Pierre Thomas balancing out the backfield. Head coach Sean Payton called the shots with fearless creativity, going for it on fourth down, dialing up trick plays, and keeping defenses off balance. But the biggest difference was the defense. Under new coordinator Greg Williams, the Saints forced a league-high 39 turnovers, led by Darren Sharper's 9 interceptions. It wasn't a lockdown unit. It was opportunistic, aggressive, and timely. They started the season 13-0, then rested starters after locking up the number 1 seed. In the playoffs, they crushed the Cardinals and survived an overtime thriller against the Vikings to reach Super Bowl 44. There, they faced the Colts and Peyton Manning. After falling behind early, the Saints swung momentum with a surprise onside kick to start the second half. A gutsy, unforgettable call. Breeze threw 2 second-half touchdowns, and Tracy Porter's pick 6 sealed the deal. Final score, 31-17, Saints win their first Super Bowl. In a city still recovering from Hurricane Katrina, this team meant everything. 2009 wasn't just a championship. It was redemption, joy, and history. New York Giants, 2007, 10-6. This wasn't their most dominant team, it wasn't their highest seed, but it was the most unforgettable season in Giants history, and maybe the greatest underdog run the NFL has ever seen. In 2007, the Giants went 10-6, finishing second in the NFC East. They weren't flashy, they weren't perfect, but they were built for the road, and built for the moment. Led by Eli Manning, who had been doubted for years, and a relentless pass rush powered by Michael Strahan, Osi Umenyiora, and Justin Tuck, the Giants got hot at the perfect time. They won 3 straight road games in the playoffs, in Tampa, in Dallas, and in Green Bay, to reach Super Bowl 42 against the undefeated 18-0 New England Patriots. No one gave them a chance, but the Giants' defense smothered Brady all night, and Eli, known for his calm demeanor, delivered one of the most iconic drives in football history. And 3rd and 5, he escaped a near sack, rolled out, and launched a pass that David Tyree pinned against his helmet for a miraculous first down. A few plays later, Plaxico Burress caught the game-winning touchdown with 35 seconds left. Final score, 17-14. The perfect Patriots were no more. The Giants were Super Bowl champions. It was gritty, improbable, and absolutely legendary. 2007 will always be remembered as the year David toppled Goliath, and the Giants pulled off the upset of the century. New York Jets, 1968, 11-3. This wasn't just the Jets' best season, it was the most important win in AFL history. In 1968, the Jets went 11-3, led by charismatic quarterback Joe Namath, the swagger of head coach Weeb Ewbank, and a team built to challenge the NFL's dominance in the final years before the AFL-NFL merger. Namath threw for over 3,000 yards, unheard of at the time, while Don Maynard and George Sauer stretched defenses deep, and Matt Snell gave them a power run game. The defense, led by Larry Grantham, Verlin Biggs, and Jerry Philbin, was aggressive and disciplined. The Jets won the AFL championship by beating the Oakland Raiders, then entered Super Bowl III as massive underdogs, facing the 13-1 Baltimore Colts, who were widely expected to blow them out. Then came Namath's guarantee. He boldly told the media the Jets would win, and he backed it up. The Jets controlled the game from start to finish, with Snell rushing for 121 yards and the defense forcing 5 turnovers. Namath managed the clock, avoided mistakes, and let the defense do the rest. Final score, Jets 16, Colts 7. It was the first time an AFL team had won the Super Bowl, and it validated the merger before it even happened. For the Jets, it remains their only Super Bowl appearance and only championship since the AFL-NFL merger. 1968 wasn't just a great season. It was the year the Jets made history and changed football forever. Philadelphia Eagles, 2017, 13-3. This wasn't just the Eagles' best season. It was the one that finally brought a Lombardi trophy to Philadelphia. In 2017, the Eagles went 13-3 under second-year head coach Doug Peterson, with Carson Wentz playing like an MVP and the team dominating in the trenches. They had the number 3 scoring offense, a top 5 defense, and one of the deepest rosters in the league. Wentz threw 33 touchdowns in just 13 games, but his season ended early with a torn ACL in Week 14. Many thought Philly's Super Bowl hopes were finished, but backup quarterback Nick Foles stepped in and became a legend. The Eagles embraced the underdog role, wearing dog masks, feeding off doubt, and knocking off the Falcons and Vikings in the playoffs, including a 38-7 blowout in the NFC Championship game. Then came Super Bowl 52, a shootout against the defending champion Patriots and Tom Brady. Foles was fearless. He threw for 373 yards and 3 touchdowns, even caught a touchdown himself on the now iconic Philly Special. The game went down to the wire, but the Eagles held on for a 41-33 victory, winning their first Super Bowl in franchise history. It wasn't just a title, it was a statement. to the league, to the fans, and to the city. 2017 turned doubt into belief and backup into folklore. It's a season Eagles fans will never forget. Pittsburgh Steelers, 1978, 14-2. This was the most complete team in Steelers history and the peak of the Steel Curtain dynasty. In 1978, Pittsburgh went 14-2, the best record of the Chuck Noll era. By this point, they had already won 2 Super Bowls, but the 78 team took things to a different level, pairing their legendary defense with a newly unleashed offense. Quarterback Terry Bradshaw had his best season, throwing for over 2,900 yards and 28 touchdowns, en route to winning NFL MVP. Lynn Swann and John Stallworth gave him 2 elite targets, and Franco Harris remained the engine of the ground game. But the heart of the team was still its defense, the Steel Curtain. With Mean Joe Green, Jack Lambert, Mel Blount, and Jack Ham, Pittsburgh led the league in interceptions and ranked top 5 in every major defensive category. They hit hard, played fast, and intimidated everyone in their path. They cruised through the playoffs, defeating the Broncos and Oilers, and then faced the Dallas Cowboys in Super Bowl 13, a rematch of their 1976 showdown. Bradshaw threw 4 touchdown passes, including 2 to Swann, and the Steelers won 35-31 in a game that was closer on the scoreboard than it was on the field. It was their 3rd Super Bowl in 5 years, and the one that truly cemented them as the team of the decade. 1978 wasn't just Pittsburgh's best team. It was the version where everything came together: offense, defense, and legacy. San Francisco 49ers, 1989, 14-2. This was the most dominant version of one of the NFL's most iconic dynasties. In 1989, the 49ers went 14-2 under first-year head coach George Seifert, but the foundation was already in place, built by Bill Walsh, led by Joe Montana, and executed to near perfection. Montana had his best season, throwing for 3,521 yards, 26 touchdowns, and just 8 interceptions. He won NFL MVP, running the West Coast offense with surgical precision. His connection with Jerry Rice, who had over 1,400 receiving yards and 17 touchdowns, was unstoppable. Roger Craig added over 1,500 scrimmage yards, and the offensive line gave Montana all day to throw. But what made the '89 team special was the defense. With stars like Charles Haley, Ronnie Lott, and Keena Turner, the 49ers finished top 5 in scoring defense. They didn't just bend and not break, they suffocated. In the playoffs, they crushed the Vikings and Rams by a combined 62-12, then faced John Elway and the Broncos in Super Bowl 24. What followed was the biggest blowout in Super Bowl history. Montana threw 5 touchdown passes, and the 49ers won 55-10. A flawless 60-minute masterpiece that left no doubt. They became the first team to win 4 Super Bowls with the same quarterback, and the 1989 version was the most complete, most balanced, and most dominant of them all. Seattle Seahawks, 2013, 13-3. This was the year the Seahawks went from rising contender to full-blown powerhouse and delivered one of the most dominant Super Bowl performances of all time. In 2013, Seattle went 13-3, powered by the league's #1 defense, a relentless ground game, and the poise of second-year quarterback Russell Wilson. On offense, they didn't overwhelm with stats. They controlled the clock, made big plays when needed, and let the defense take care of the rest. Marshawn Lynch ran for over 1,200 yards and 12 touchdowns, bringing a physical, punishing style that wore defenses down. And Wilson, mature beyond his years, threw 26 touchdowns with just 9 interceptions, delivering clutch throws week after week. But the heart of this team was the Legion of Boom. With Richard Sherman, Earl Thomas, Cam Chancellor, and Byron Maxwell, the Seahawks secondary shut down elite receivers and punished anyone who came across the middle. The defense forced 39 turnovers, allowed the fewest points and yards in the league, and suffocated opposing quarterbacks with a fierce pass rush led by Michael Bennett and Cliff Avril. In the playoffs, Seattle took down Drew Brees and the Saints, then beat the 49ers in an unforgettable NFC championship, sealed by Sherman's deflection in the end zone. Then came Super Bowl 48. Facing Peyton Manning's record-breaking Broncos offense, Seattle didn't just win. they annihilated them. From the opening safety to the final whistle, it was a 43-8 blowout that showcased one of the most complete teams ever assembled. 2013 wasn't just the Seahawks' best season. It was a blueprint for dominance, built on speed, swagger, and suffocating defense. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, 2020, 11-5. This wasn't just Tampa Bay's best season, it was the most transformative in franchise history. In 2020, the Buccaneers went 11-5, ending a 13-year playoff drought in their first season with Tom Brady under center. At 43 years old, Brady brought not just elite quarterback play, but a championship mentality, and immediately turned the Bucs into contenders. The offense was loaded. Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Antonio Brown, and Rob Gronkowski gave Brady endless weapons. Leonard Fournette and Ronald Jones anchored the ground game. And behind one of the NFL's best offensive lines, Brady threw for over 4,600 yards and 40 touchdowns. But it was the defense that quietly made the difference. Led by Devin White, Levante David, Shaq Barrett, and Jason Pierre-Paul, the Bucs finished top 5 against the run, dominated the trenches, and got hot at the right time. Tampa Bay won 3 straight road games in the playoffs, beating Drew Brees, Aaron Rodgers, and the top-seeded Packers, to reach Super Bowl 55, hosted in their own stadium. There, they faced the defending champion Chiefs and dismantled them. The Bucs pressured Mahomes 29 times, sacked him 3 times, and didn't allow a single touchdown. Brady threw 3 first-half touchdowns and controlled the game start to finish in a 31-9 win, earning his 7th Super Bowl ring and Tampa Bay's 2nd in franchise history. 2020 wasn't just a title run. It was the year the Buccaneers went from afterthought to champions. Tennessee Titans, 1999, 13-3. First season as the Tennessee Titans. This was the franchise's first year with a new name, a new stadium, and a team that came just 1 yard short of immortality. In 1999, the Titans went 13-3 under head coach Jeff Fisher, with a physical, punishing identity on both sides of the ball. Steve McNair was tough and poised, while Eddie George carried the offense with over 1,500 total yards, running behind a dominant offensive line. Defensively, Tennessee was fast, nasty, and opportunistic, with playmakers like Jevin Kearse, a rookie who racked up 14.5 sacks, earning the nickname The Freak. The Titans finished top 5 in scoring defense and suffocated teams with relentless pressure. But the magic came in the playoffs. In the wildcard round, they pulled off the legendary Music City Miracle, a last-second cross-field lateral touchdown returned to beat the Bills 22-16. That moment sparked a run that continued through the Colts and Jaguars, propelling the Titans to Super Bowl 34 against the high-powered St. Louis Rams. The game came down to the final play. With 6 seconds left and the Titans trailing 23-16, McNair hit Kevin Dyson on a slant, and he raced toward the goal line. But Rams linebacker Mike Jones tackled him at the 1-yard line. Time expired. The Titans were 1 yard short of tying the game. It was heartbreak, but it was also the greatest season in franchise history. 1999 wasn't just about a near title. It was about grit, belief, and a team that left everything on the field. Washington Commanders, 1991, 14-2. This wasn't just Washington's best team. It's one of the most underrated championship squads in NFL history. In 1991, Washington went 14-2 under legendary head coach Joe Gibbs, dominating opponents with ruthless efficiency on both sides of the ball. They outscored teams by 261 points, led the NFL in scoring, and trailed for fewer minutes than any team in modern league history. Quarterback Mark Rypien threw for over 3,500 yards and 28 touchdowns, connecting with Art Monk, Gary Clark, and Ricky Sanders, the trio known as the Posse. Running back Ernest Biner provided balance, and the offensive line, the Hogs, gave Rypien all the time he needed. Defensively, they were just as good. Led by Darrell Green, Wilbur Marshall, and Charles Mann, Washington finished top 5 in scoring defense and created turnovers in bunches. They started the season 11-0, finished 14-2, and cruised through the playoffs, blowing out the Falcons and crushing the Lions 41-10 in the NFC Championship. In Super Bowl 26, they overwhelmed the Buffalo Bills 37-24, with Ripien earning MVP honors. Washington didn't just win, they dominated from week 1 to the final whistle. No drama, no missed kicks, no miracle drives, just pure, complete football. 1991 was the franchise at its absolute peak. A team so good, it often gets forgotten because it made winning look easy. If you enjoyed this, I'm going to be posting a lot here, so it would mean a lot if you subscribed. Thanks for watching. Arizona Cardinals, founded 1898. The Cardinals aren't just the oldest NFL franchise. They predate the NFL itself by over 2 decades. The team was originally founded in 1898 in Chicago by a group of neighborhood athletes who played on a sandlot field. Back then, they were called the Morgan Athletic Club, and there was no league, just local competition and loose scheduling. The team changed names shortly after to the Racine Normals, based on the street they played on, Racine Avenue in Chicago. In 1901, they got their first real uniforms, a set of used, faded maroon jerseys from the University of Chicago. When team owner Chris O'Brien saw them, he declared the color wasn't maroon, it was cardinal red. The name stuck. They became the Racine Cardinals, and kept that name when they joined the NFL in 1920 as one of its charter members. They won NFL titles in 1925 and 1947, but struggled with attendance and money in a crowded Chicago market, where the Chicago Bears dominated the spotlight. So in 1960, the Cardinals moved to St. Louis, where they were known as the St. Louis Cardinals, sharing the name with the city's baseball team. They stayed in St. Louis for nearly 3 decades, but never found long-term success. In 1988, the team relocated again, this time to Phoenix, Arizona, and eventually rebranded in 1994 as the Arizona Cardinals to represent the entire state. Chicago Bears, founded 1919. The Chicago Bears trace their roots back to 1919, when they were founded by the A.E. Staley Company, a starch manufacturer in Decatur, Illinois. The team was originally known as the Decatur Staleys, and they were created as a company-sponsored squad, part athletic club, part public relations tool. But this wasn't a beer league operation. They paid their players and took football seriously from day one. In 1920, the Staleys joined the newly formed American Professional Football Association, the league that would become the NFL in 1922. The team was managed and coached by a 25-year-old named George Halas, a former University of Illinois standout and Navy veteran. He quickly became the face of the franchise, and later the league itself. In 1921, Halas convinced the Staley Company to let him move the team to Chicago. As part of the deal, he kept the name Staley's for 1 more year, and then rebranded in 1922 as the Chicago Bears. The name was a nod to the city's baseball team, the Cubs. Halas figured if the Cubs played baseball, the bigger, rougher Bears should play football. From there, the Bears became a cornerstone of the NFL. They won their first league title in 1921, then added 8 more championships before the Super Bowl era. They were known for hard-nosed, ground-and-pound football, exemplified by the legendary Bronco Nagurski, and later by the revolutionary T-formation offense, which Halas helped pioneer in the 1940s. Under Halas, the Bears became a dynasty and helped stabilize the NFL during its early, volatile years. Halas coached the team for 40 seasons, won 324 games, and left behind a legacy that still shapes the league. Green Bay Packers, founded 1919. The team was founded in 1919 by Curly Lambeau and George Calhoun, 2 former high school teammates who wanted to start a semi-pro team in their hometown of Green Bay, Wisconsin. Lambeau worked for the Indian Packing Company, which agreed to fund the team with $500 for uniforms and equipment. In exchange, the team would be named after the company. That's how the name Packers was born. In 1921, the Packers joined the NFL. They were almost immediately kicked out for using college players illegally, but were reinstated the same year, marking the true beginning of what would become the 3rd oldest franchise in the league. The Packers faced unique challenges. Green Bay was, and still is, the smallest market in major professional sports. Most early NFL teams were folding or relocating to larger cities, but the Packers survived thanks to something no other team had: community ownership. In 1923, the team was reorganized as a nonprofit, publicly owned corporation, funded by local fans and businesses. That model still exists today, with over 500,000 shareholders who collectively own the team. It's the only structure of its kind in American sports. Under Curly Lambeau, the Packers became a powerhouse in the 1920s and 30s, winning 6 NFL championships. In the 1960s, under legendary coach Vince Lombardi, they added 5 more, including victories in the first 2 Super Bowls. Their home stadium, Lambeau Field, opened in 1957 and is now considered hallowed ground, a symbol of tradition, loyalty, and frigid playoff games. New York Giants, founded 1925. In the early 1920s, professional football was still considered second class compared to the college game. Most NFL teams were based in small towns like Canton or Rock Island. The league knew that to grow, it needed a presence in the country's biggest city, New York. So in 1925, the NFL awarded a franchise to Tim Mara, a bookmaker and businessman who had never even seen a football game. The price? Just $500. Roughly $8,000 in today's money. He named the team the New York Giants, borrowing the name from the city's already established baseball team, a common move back then. But unlike many startup franchises that folded quickly, Mara's Giants gave the NFL credibility. They were the league's first big market team, and their success helped professional football shed its backwater image. The team played its first season at the Polo Grounds in Manhattan and quickly built a following. By 1927, they won their first NFL championship, and in the 1930s and 40s, they became a consistent powerhouse, appearing in 8 championship games before the Super Bowl era. Owned by the Mara family for 4 generations, the Giants are one of only a few franchises that have remained in the same city with the same name since their founding. Detroit Lions, founded 1930. The Detroit Lions weren't always Detroit's team. They were born as a small-town franchise in Portsmouth, Ohio. In 1930, a group of businessmen founded the Portsmouth Spartans, a scrappy team in a working-class river town with a population under 50,000. Despite their size, the Spartans held their own against bigger city franchises, even finishing second in the league in 1932. That 1932 season ended in a moment that changed NFL history. The Spartans faced the Bears in a postseason showdown at Chicago Stadium, indoors, on an 80-yard field, with dirt and hash marks drawn in chalk. It was the first NFL playoff game, and it led the league to adopt divisional play and a formal championship game starting the following season. But the Great Depression hit small-town teams hard. Portsmouth couldn't financially sustain a pro team, and in 1934, the franchise was bought by Detroit radio executive George A. Richards and moved to Detroit. They were renamed the Lions to align with the Detroit Tigers baseball team, and because, as Richards put it, a lion is the king of the jungle, and we hope to be the kings of the NFL. The move paid off quickly. In their first season in Detroit, the Lions went 10-3 and became a marquee team. They also established one of the NFL's most enduring traditions, the Thanksgiving Day game, which started in 1934 as a promotional idea by Richards, and still continues today. Washington Commanders, founded 1932. In 1932, the NFL granted a franchise to George Preston Marshall, a successful laundry businessman in Boston. He named the team the Boston Braves, and they shared a stadium and a name with the city's baseball team. But in 1933, the football team moved to Fenway Park, home of the Red Sox. To avoid confusion and carve out its own identity, Marshall renamed the team the Boston Redskins. He kept the Native American branding and hired Lone Star Dietz, who claimed Native ancestry, as head coach, a controversial decision that would spark debate for decades. Despite some early success, including the 1936 NFL championship game, Boston fans didn't embrace the team. Poor attendance and a strained relationship with the city pushed Marshall to move the franchise in 1937 to Washington, D.C., where it immediately found a fan base and a fresh start. The team's first season in Washington was a dream. Rookie quarterback Sammy Baugh led them to an NFL championship in 1937 and another in 1942. Over the next few decades, Washington became one of the NFL's most popular teams, especially during the televised boom of the 1970s and 80s. Under head coach Joe Gibbs, they won 3 Super Bowls, solidifying their reputation as a powerhouse franchise. However, the team's original name and imagery became increasingly controversial. After decades of protest, mounting public pressure, and sponsor backlash, the organization officially retired the Redskins name in 2020. They played 2 seasons as the Washington football team, and in 2022, rebranded as the Washington Commanders. By the way, I'm going to be posting a lot here, so it would mean a lot if you subscribed and dropped a like for the algorithm. Pittsburgh Steelers, founded 1933. The Pittsburgh Steelers were born in 1933, but not under that name. That year, Pennsylvania finally legalized professional football, allowing the NFL to expand into the state. Art Rooney, a local boxing promoter and businessman, paid $2,500 for a franchise and named the team the Pittsburgh Pirates, after the city's popular baseball team. But success didn't come quickly. For the first 7 years, the Pirates were one of the worst teams in the league, cycling through coaches, struggling to find talent, and finishing with a losing record every season. The turning point came in 1940, when Rooney renamed the team the Steelers, a nod to Pittsburgh's identity as the steel capital of the world. World War II caused player shortages, so the Steelers were forced to merge with other teams just to field a roster. In 1943, they became the Steagles after temporarily joining with the Eagles. In 1944, they merged again, this time with the Chicago Cardinals, forming a short-lived and historically terrible team known unofficially as Card Pit. The post-war years were rocky, but the Steelers slowly began to find their footing. Still, it wasn't until the 1970s that the franchise transformed into a powerhouse. Under head coach Chuck Noll, Pittsburgh built a dynasty. They drafted legends like Terry Bradshaw, Joe Green, Franco Harris, Mel Blount, Jack Lambert, and Lynn Swann, and won 4 Super Bowls in 6 years. Philadelphia Eagles, founded 1933. In 1931, the NFL's Frankfurt Yellow Jackets, a team based in Northeast Philadelphia, folded due to financial struggles and a stadium fire. 2 years later, in 1933, the NFL wanted to re-establish a presence in the city, so it awarded a new franchise to Pennsylvania businessmen Bert Bell and Lud Ray for $2,500. That team became the Philadelphia Eagles, named after the Blue Eagle, a symbol of the National Recovery Administration, a New Deal program launched during the Great Depression. The name was a nod to American resilience and rebirth. Like many early NFL franchises, the Eagles got off to a rough start. They didn't record a winning season until 1943, and during World War II, they were temporarily merged with the Pittsburgh Steelers to form the Steagles due to league-wide player shortages. The real breakthrough came in the late 1940s. With head coach Greasy Neal and Hall of Fame running back Steve Van Buren, the Eagles won back-to-back NFL championships in 1948 and 1949, including a 1948 title game played in a blizzard. The only score came from a Van Buren touchdown. The Eagles became known for their gritty style, loyal fan base, and defensive identity, traits that still define the franchise today. They moved into Franklin Field, then Veterans Stadium, and later Lincoln Financial Field. But the passion in the stands never changed. It took nearly 60 more years to win another title, but in 2017, the Eagles captured their first Super Bowl, completing a story that started nearly a century earlier with a symbol of hope during America's hardest times. Cleveland Browns, founded 1946. In 1944, Cleveland businessman Arthur Mickey McBride secured the rights to a new pro football team in the upstart All-America Football Conference, AAFC, a league created to rival the NFL. To build his franchise, McBride hired a young, no-nonsense coach from Ohio State, Paul Brown, and that decision changed football history. Brown brought a revolutionary approach to the game. He introduced things we now take for granted: film study, playbooks, scouting departments, and full-time coaching staffs. He ran the Browns like a machine, and in their very first season in 1946, they went 12-2 and won the AAFC championship. They didn't stop there. The Browns won 4 straight AAFC titles, with stars like Otto Graham and Marion Motley. They were so dominant that when the AAFC folded in 1949, the NFL had no choice but to absorb them, even though many owners feared they were too good. The Browns joined the NFL in 1950 and immediately proved the doubters wrong by winning the NFL championship in their very first season, beating the Rams in a thriller. Throughout the 1950s and early 60s, the Browns remained one of the league's top teams. Paul Brown eventually clashed with ownership and was fired in 1963, but his blueprint stayed in place. In 1964, with Jim Brown at running back, one of the greatest players of all time, Cleveland won another NFL championship, still their last title to this day. The team moved to the new AFC after the 1970 NFL-AFL merger, but the most dramatic moment in franchise history came in 1995, when owner Art Modell controversially moved the team to Baltimore. The NFL suspended operations for the Browns, but promised the city the name, colors, and history would remain. In 1999, the Browns were officially reactivated as an expansion franchise, picking up where they left off, with one of the most loyal, passionate fan bases in the league, San Francisco 49ers, founded 1946. The San Francisco 49ers were the first major professional sports franchise based on the West Coast, and their story begins in the post-World War II boom of 1946. Founded by lumber magnate Tony Morabito, the team was created to bring pro football to a region that had been largely ignored by the major leagues. Morabito had long believed that the NFL needed a West Coast presence. After being rejected multiple times by the NFL, he turned to the newly formed All-America Football Conference, the same league that launched the Cleveland Browns. He was granted a franchise and named the team the 49ers, a tribute to the fortune seekers of the 1849 California Gold Rush, a symbol of risk-taking and adventure that fit perfectly with San Francisco's identity. The team played its first games at Kezar Stadium in Golden Gate Park, and while they were often overshadowed by Paul Brown's powerhouse Browns, the 49ers were competitive and popular right out of the gate. In 1949, when the AAFC merged with the NFL, the 49ers were one of only 3 teams to survive the merger, but early NFL success was slow. For decades, the 49ers were competitive, but never champions. That all changed in the 1980s. The hiring of Bill Walsh in 1979 brought in a new philosophy: the West Coast offense, a short-passing, timing-based system that revolutionized football. With quarterback Joe Montana and later Steve Young, wide receiver Jerry Rice, and a defense anchored by Ronnie Lott, the 49ers became a dynasty. Between 1981 and 1994, they won 5 Super Bowls, cementing themselves as one of the greatest franchises in NFL history. Los Angeles Rams, founded 1936. The Rams' story begins not in California, but in the industrial Midwest. They were founded in 1936 as the Cleveland Rams, joining the NFL as part of the league's slow expansion during the Great Depression. After a few rocky seasons, the franchise found success, winning the NFL championship in 1945, led by quarterback Bob Waterfield. But then, something almost unheard of happened. Just 1 month after winning the title, the team left Cleveland. Owner Dan Reeves saw bigger opportunities out west, with the country emerging from World War II and the population booming in California. He decided to move the team to Los Angeles, making the Rams the first NFL franchise to play on the West Coast. Their new home was the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum, a massive 90,000-seat stadium that gave the Rams instant visibility. But there was one condition: the Coliseum Commission required the team to be racially integrated if they were to play there. So in 1946, the Rams signed Kenny Washington and Woody Strode, 2 former UCLA stars, making them the first black players in the modern NFL era, a full year before Jackie Robinson broke baseball's color barrier. That move helped reshape the league's future. Through the 1950s and 60s, the Rams developed a reputation for innovation and star power, with players like Norm Van Brocklin and later the fearsome defensive line known as the Fearsome Foursome. They moved to Anaheim in 1980, but stayed rooted in the Southern California identity. In 1995, the team relocated again, this time to St. Louis, where they'd win Super Bowl 34 with the greatest show on turf, led by Kurt Warner, Marshall Faulk, and Isaac Bruce. But in 2016, the Rams returned to Los Angeles, becoming the centerpiece of the NFL's new Hollywood vision. In 2021, they christened SoFi Stadium with a Super Bowl win, their first in LA, and fully re-established themselves as a West Coast powerhouse, Indianapolis Colts, founded 1953. The origins of the Colts franchise are a bit tangled, involving failed teams, a last-minute revival, and one of the most infamous relocations in NFL history. It starts with Baltimore, a city that had briefly hosted a team called the Colts in the early 1950s. That version of the franchise folded in 1951, but just 2 years later, in 1953, NFL owners approved a new team for Baltimore, using the same Colts name, colors, and fan identity. It wasn't technically the same franchise on paper, but for fans, the reborn Colts were a continuation of their team. Under ownership from Carroll Rosenblum, the Baltimore Colts became one of the league's most respected franchises. They drafted quarterback Johnny Unitas in 1956, and that changed everything. Unitas wasn't just good, he was a revolution. With his poise, arm strength, and leadership, he helped usher in the modern passing game. The Colts' 1958 NFL championship win over the Giants, a dramatic overtime thriller, became known as the greatest game ever played. It helped launch pro football into the national consciousness and made the Colts a household name. The team won NFL titles in 1958, 1959, and 1968, and finally captured Super Bowl V in 1970. But behind the scenes, the team was struggling with financial issues and stadium concerns. After years of disputes with the city of Baltimore, owner Robert Irsay made a controversial decision in 1984. He moved the Colts to Indianapolis and did it literally overnight, using Mayflower moving trucks under the cover of darkness. It became one of the most dramatic and bitter relocations in sports history. Despite the rocky start in Indiana, the Colts rebuilt, slowly. In 2006, they won Super Bowl 41, and even after Manning left, the team struck gold again with Andrew Luck. Buffalo Bills, founded 1960. Buffalo had a brief NFL history in the 1920s, but by mid-century it was without a team. That changed when Ralph Wilson, a Detroit-based businessman and one of the AFL's founding owners, brought pro football back to Western New York. He named the team the Buffalo Bills, inspired by a previous Buffalo franchise and the famous Wild West showman, Buffalo Bill Cody. Wilson's franchise quickly built a blue-collar identity, matching the spirit of the city it represented. The team's original stadium was War Memorial Stadium, affectionately called the Rock Pile, and it created one of the most passionate fan bases in football, the start of what would become Bills Mafia. The Bills found early success in the AFL. Led by legendary coach Lou Saban and quarterback Jack Kemp, they won back-to-back AFL championships in 1964 and 1965. But the real golden era came in the late 1980s and early 90s. Under head coach Marv Levy and general manager Bill Polian, the Bills built a juggernaut. With stars like Jim Kelly, Thurman Thomas, Andre Reed, and Bruce Smith, Buffalo made an unprecedented 4 straight Super Bowl appearances from 1990 to 1993. No team in NFL history has ever matched that streak, but heartbreak followed each time, with the Bills losing all 4 Super Bowls. With Josh Allen at quarterback and a re-energized defense, the Bills are once again a Super Bowl contender, and Buffalo is alive with belief again. Denver Broncos, founded 1960. Denver was not considered a prime football market at the time. The Broncos had one of the league's smallest stadiums, the least funding, and, perhaps worst of all, some of the worst uniforms in football history, famously featuring mustard yellow jerseys with vertically striped socks. But despite the rocky start, the team's presence in the mile-high city helped turn Denver into a football town. The fans were loyal, even as the team struggled through 10 straight losing seasons after its founding. Things began to shift in the 1970s. The team moved into Mile High Stadium, and the arrival of head coach Red Miller and the legendary Orange Crush defense gave Denver its first identity as a contender. In 1977, the Broncos reached Super Bowl XII, their first appearance. Even though they lost to the Cowboys, the stage was set. But the defining era of Broncos football began in 1983, when they pulled off one of the biggest draft trades in history. Quarterback John Elway, who had refused to play for the Baltimore Colts, was acquired by Denver in a franchise-changing move. Elway would become the face of the team for nearly 2 decades, leading the Broncos to 5 Super Bowl appearances and 3 AFC titles throughout his career. After Elway's retirement, the team went through a transitional period until another star quarterback arrived, Peyton Manning. In 2012, Denver signed the future Hall of Famer, and within a few years, the Broncos were once again at the top of the league. Kansas City Chiefs, founded 1960 as Dallas Texans. The franchise we know today as the Kansas City Chiefs actually began as the Dallas Texans, one of the original 8 teams in the American Football League in 1960. The team was founded by Lamar Hunt, the son of a Texas oil tycoon who had been repeatedly denied an NFL franchise. So he created his own league, the AFL, and put a team in Dallas to compete directly with the NFL's new expansion team, the Cowboys. That rivalry couldn't last. Despite early success, including an AFL championship in 1962, the Texans struggled for fan attention in Dallas. So Hunt made a bold decision. He moved the team to Kansas City in 1963 and rebranded them as the Chiefs, a name chosen to honor the nickname of Kansas City Mayor Harold Roe Bartle, who had been instrumental in bringing the team to town. It didn't take long for the Chiefs to become one of the AFL's most successful teams. Under head coach Hank Stram, and with stars like Len Dawson, Bobby Bell, and Willie Lanier, the Chiefs won 3 AFL championships, including a win in the final AFL-NFL championship game before the merger, Super Bowl IV in 1970. Where they upset the heavily favored Minnesota Vikings. That win helped legitimize the AFL as equal to the NFL and solidified Kansas City's place in football history. After that early peak, the Chiefs went into a decades-long drought with few playoff appearances and no Super Bowl trips. But they remained beloved in Kansas City, with one of the loudest and most loyal fan bases in the NFL at Arrowhead Stadium, which opened in 1972 and has become legendary for its deafening noise. Everything changed in the late 2010s when head coach Andy Reid and general manager Brett Veach built a new powerhouse centered around quarterback Patrick Mahomes, the 10th overall pick in the 2017 draft. With Mahomes, the Chiefs transformed into an offensive juggernaut. Dallas Cowboys, founded 1960. In the late 1950s, pro football had exploded in popularity across the U.S., but Texas, the heartland of high school and college football, had no NFL franchise. Oilman Clint Murchison Jr. saw an opportunity. He secured the rights to a team in 1960, but there was a catch. The NFL was hesitant to expand into Dallas because the rival AFL had already awarded a franchise there. So Murchison played a brilliant hand. He purchased the rights to the Washington Redskins fight song, Hail to the Redskins, from the composer, who had a grudge against Washington's owner. Then, Murchison used it as leverage. Either approve the Cowboys as a franchise or lose your fight song. It worked. The NFL granted Dallas its first ever team, and the Cowboys were born. From the start, the team had a modern vision. They hired Tom Landry, a former Giants defensive coordinator, known for his stoic presence and innovation. Landry created the flex defense, brought in advanced scouting, and helped establish Dallas as a forward-thinking operation, even if their early years were brutal. The Cowboys went winless in their debut season, but by the late 1960s, they became a juggernaut. They reached 5 Super Bowls in the 1970s, winning 2, and cemented themselves as the most glamorous franchise in the league. By the 1990s, under the flamboyant ownership of Jerry Jones, the Cowboys entered their second dynasty. Behind Troy Aikman, Emmitt Smith, Michael Irvin, and head coach Jimmy Johnson, Dallas won 3 Super Bowls in 4 years, dominating the decade. Nicknamed America's Team due to their nationwide following and iconic star logo, the Cowboys became more than just a football franchise. They were a brand, a symbol of winning, and a cultural touchstone. Las Vegas Raiders, founded 1960. They were originally founded in 1960 as the Oakland Raiders, joining the AFL as a late addition after the Minnesota Vikings backed out to join the NFL. With little time to prepare, Oakland scrambled to build a roster and a brand. and the early years were rough. But that all changed when Al Davis arrived. In 1963, Davis became the team's head coach and eventually the controlling owner. He brought swagger, defiance, and a win-at-all-costs mentality. Under his leadership, the Raiders adopted the iconic silver and black colors and a rebellious identity. Just win, baby. Throughout the late 60s and 70s, the Raiders became one of the most feared teams in football, led by legends like Ken Stabler, Fred Biletnikoff, Gene Upshaw, Art Shell, and John Madden as head coach. The Raiders won their first Super Bowl in 1976. But the Raiders were never stationary for long. In 1982, frustrated with stadium issues in Oakland, Davis moved the team to Los Angeles, becoming the LA Raiders. There, they reached new heights, winning Super Bowl XVIII in 1983 with a dominant performance against Washington. By 1995, the team moved back to Oakland, but the relationship between the franchise and the city never truly healed. The stadium situation remained poor, and despite some flashes of success, like their Super Bowl run in 2002, the Raiders struggled with consistency. Eventually, Al Davis's son, Mark Davis, inherited the team and sought a long-term solution. He found it in Las Vegas. In 2020, the franchise officially became the Las Vegas Raiders, moving into the state-of-the-art Allegiant Stadium just off the Vegas Strip. It marked the first NFL team in Nevada, and while it was a controversial move, it gave the Raiders a modern home, something they had long lacked. Los Angeles Chargers, founded 1960. The Los Angeles Chargers were one of the original 8 AFL franchises, founded in 1960 by hotel heir Baron Hilton, son of the Hilton Hotels empire. The team was based in Los Angeles for just one season before moving to San Diego in 1961. A decision driven by low attendance and the belief that a smaller market would offer a more passionate fan base. In San Diego, the Chargers quickly became one of the AFL's strongest franchises. Under head coach Sid Gilman, a visionary offensive mind, the team revolutionized the passing game. Gilman's offenses were vertical, fast-paced, and years ahead of their time, laying the groundwork for the modern NFL aerial attack. The Chargers made 5 AFL championship appearances in the 1960s and won their only league title in 1963, dominating the Boston Patriots 51-10. That remains the franchise's lone league championship. During their San Diego years, the team became known for electric players like Kellen Winslow and LaDainian Tomlinson. In the 2000s, San Diego saw a resurgence under head coach Marty Schottenheimer and later Norv Turner, with Tomlinson setting touchdown records and Phillip Rivers emerging as a durable, gunslinging quarterback. But despite deep playoff runs and talent across the roster, a Super Bowl appearance always remained just out of reach. Then came the controversial move. In 2017, after years of failed negotiations for a new stadium in San Diego, the Chargers relocated back to Los Angeles, becoming co-tenants with the Rams at SoFi Stadium in Inglewood. The move angered much of their original fan base, and the team has struggled to build a strong following. However, with young quarterback Justin Herbert leading the charge and one of the most talented rosters in football, the Chargers are once again positioned to compete. New England Patriots, founded 1960. The franchise that would become the New England Patriots started modestly in 1960 as the Boston Patriots, a founding member of the AFL. Their original home field, Nickerson Field, followed by a nomadic stretch playing games at venues like Fenway Park, Harvard Stadium, and Boston College. The team's original logo, Pat Patriot, a Revolutionary War soldier hiking a football, was voted on by fans and captured the local identity. But success on the field was hard to come by. The Patriots reached just one AFL championship game in the league's 10-year history and lost badly to the Chargers in 1963. By 1971, after years of subpar stadiums and inconsistent play, the franchise rebranded as the New England Patriots and moved to a new stadium in Foxborough, Massachusetts. It was an effort to expand the fan base beyond Boston and finally give the team a permanent home. For the next 2 decades, the Patriots were a middle-of-the-pack franchise. They reached Super Bowl XX in 1985 under head coach Raymond Berry, only to be steamrolled by the Chicago Bears' legendary defense. The 1990s brought even more inconsistency. until a series of events in the early 2000s would alter the course of NFL history. In 2000, the Patriots hired Bill Belichick as head coach, and in the 6th round of that same draft, they selected an unheralded quarterback out of Michigan, Tom Brady. 1 year later, Brady stepped in for injured starter Drew Bledsoe and never looked back. Under Belichick and Brady, the Patriots began a dynasty unmatched in modern football. From Tuck Rule games to Spygate, Deflategate, and the 28-3 comeback against the Falcons, the Patriots became the NFL's most talked about team, revered by some and hated by others. New York Jets, founded 1960. The team we now know as the New York Jets began its life in 1960 as the New York Titans, one of the 8 original members of the American Football League. At the time, they played in the old Polo Grounds, sharing the city with the far more established New York Giants, and trying desperately to find their footing. The Titans were underfunded, chaotic, and barely holding on financially. Players often practiced in public parks, and team operations were so unstable that players occasionally went unpaid. After just 3 seasons, the AFL stepped in and forced the sale of the team. That sale in 1963 changed everything. A new ownership group rebranded the team as the New York Jets, chose a green and white color scheme, and moved to Shea Stadium in Queens, right next to LaGuardia Airport. The name Jets was chosen to reflect the modern, high-flying image of the jet age and their new stadium's proximity to aviation. In 1965, the Jets made the boldest move in AFL history. They signed Joe Namath, a flashy, confident quarterback out of Alabama, to a then-record $427,000 contract. Namath became the face of the AFL and turned the Jets into must-watch TV. Then came the moment that put the AFL and the Jets into football lore. In 1969, Namath and the Jets upset the heavily favored Baltimore Colts in Super Bowl III. It was the AFL's first Super Bowl win, and Namath famously guaranteed victory days before the game. That win not only changed the Jets' legacy, but forced the NFL to respect the AFL as a legitimate league, paving the way for the AFL-NFL merger. But after that shining moment, success became fleeting. The Jets have struggled for most of their post-merger history, plagued by quarterback instability, front office turnover, and postseason droughts. They've had brief flashes, like the Mark Sanchez-led AFC Championship runs in 2009 and 2010, but have not returned to the Super Bowl since Namath's iconic win. Tennessee Titans, founded 1960. The Tennessee Titans story begins not in Nashville, but in Houston, Texas. They were one of the founding franchises of the American Football League in 1960, originally known as the Houston Oilers, and they were immediate winners. The Oilers won the very first 2 AFL championships in 1960 and 1961. They played their early home games in Yepesen Stadium, and their oil derrick logo quickly became one of the most recognizable in football. For much of their early existence, the Oilers were known for offensive firepower and passionate fans. In the late 70s and early 80s, the team developed a blue-collar identity under head coach Bum Phillips and running back Earl Campbell, who powered through defenders like a freight train. In the late 1980s and early 90s, the Oilers evolved into a high-flying team with quarterback Warren Moon, who helped popularize the run-and-shoot offense. They made the playoffs in 7 consecutive seasons, but never broke through to the Super Bowl. Their most infamous moment? The 1993 AFC wildcard game, where they blew a 32-point lead to the Bills, still the largest comeback in NFL history. Frustrated by stadium disputes and a lack of public support in Houston, owner Bud Adams decided to relocate the franchise to Tennessee. In 1997, the team played as the Tennessee Oilers, first in Memphis and then in Nashville. But the name never quite fit the new location. By 1999, the franchise was officially rebranded as the Tennessee Titans, a name chosen to evoke power, tradition, and regional pride. That same year, they moved into their new home, Adelphia Coliseum, now Nissan Stadium, and made a storybook run to Super Bowl 34. That Super Bowl ended in heartbreak. The Titans came up 1 yard short of forcing overtime in one of the most dramatic endings in NFL history. Since then, the Titans have remained competitive, with multiple playoff appearances, stars like Steve McNair, Eddie George, Chris Johnson, and Derrick Henry, and a tough, physical brand of football. Minnesota Vikings, founded 1961. The Minnesota Vikings weren't supposed to be an NFL team at all, at least not originally. In the late 1950s, a group of Minneapolis businessmen, led by Max Winter, secured rights to a franchise in the rival American Football League. But just before launching, they were approached by the NFL with a better offer. Join the established league as an expansion franchise. The owners jumped at the chance, withdrew from the AFL, and in 1960 the Minnesota Vikings were officially born, set to begin play the following year. The name Vikings was chosen to reflect the region's strong Scandinavian heritage, a nod to Minnesota's large population of Nordic immigrants and its tough, rugged climate. From day one, the franchise leaned into that identity. Cold weather, grit, and battle-tested football. The Vikings played their first season in 1961 and made an immediate splash by defeating the Chicago Bears in their debut game behind rookie quarterback Fran Tarkenton, who threw 4 touchdown passes. Though the team struggled early on, Tarkenton's arrival marked the beginning of a new era. In 1967, the Vikings hired Bud Grant, a no-nonsense coach who had dominated in the CFL. Under Grant, Minnesota became one of the most disciplined and physically imposing teams of the 1970s. The Purple People Eaters' defensive line, led by Alan Page, Carl Eller, Jim Marshall, and Gary Larson, became the backbone of a dominant era. From 1969 to 1976, the Vikings made 4 Super Bowl appearances, but heartbreak followed them. They lost each time, unable to capture the elusive title. Still, they became synonymous with postseason excellence and toughness. Despite decades of coming close, the Vikings have yet to win a Super Bowl, but they've remained one of the most consistently competitive teams in the NFL. Atlanta Falcons, founded 1966. The Atlanta Falcons were born out of a bidding war between 2 leagues and became the NFL's first team in the Deep South. In the mid-1960s, the NFL and the AFL were aggressively expanding, racing to plant their flags in untapped markets. Atlanta, one of the fastest-growing cities in the country, became a prime target. Businessman Rankin Smith, an executive with the Life Insurance Company of Georgia, originally planned to purchase an AFL franchise, but the NFL didn't want to lose ground in a city that had just opened the brand new Atlanta Fulton County Stadium, so they stepped in fast. NFL Commissioner Pete Rozelle offered Smith an expansion franchise, and to sweeten the deal, gave him exclusive NFL rights to the entire Southeast. Smith accepted, and in 1965, the Atlanta Falcons were officially awarded. The name Falcons was chosen through a fan contest. The winner, a local school teacher, said the Falcon was proud and dignified, with great courage and fight. That spirit would define the team's identity, even through decades of growing pains. Atlanta's early years were tough. The team didn't record a winning season until 1971, and only made the playoffs once in its first 12 years. In 1998, led by quarterback Chris Chandler, running back Jamal Anderson, and the legendary Dirty Bird celebration, the Falcons shocked the league by going 14-2 and reaching Super Bowl 33. Though they lost to Denver, it marked a turning point. In the 2000s and 2010s, with stars like Michael Vick, Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, and Roddy White, the Falcons became regular contenders. They reached Super Bowl 51 in 2016, only to suffer one of the most infamous collapses in sports history. Miami Dolphins, founded 1966. They were founded by lawyer and politician Joe Robbie and entertainer Danny Thomas, who were awarded an AFL expansion team set to begin play in 1966. At the time, Miami was known more for beaches than football, and many doubted whether a pro team could succeed in a city with no tradition of cold-weather gridiron grit. But the Dolphins didn't just survive, they built a legacy. In their early years, the Dolphins struggled. They wore bright aqua and orange, played in the Orange Bowl, and lost a lot of games. But things changed quickly after the AFL-NFL merger, especially with the hiring of head coach Don Shula in 1970. Shula had already made a name for himself with the Baltimore Colts, and his arrival instantly transformed the Dolphins. He emphasized discipline, fundamentals, and physicality. The turnaround was almost immediate. By 1971, the Dolphins reached their first Super Bowl. By 1972, they made history. That year, Miami won a perfect 14-0 in the regular season, then won all 3 of their playoff games, including Super Bowl VII, to become the only team in NFL history to finish a season undefeated. The 1972 Dolphins went 17-0, a feat that has never been matched. They followed it with another Super Bowl win in 1973. Throughout the 1980s and 90s, the Dolphins remained a contender, thanks largely to the brilliance of quarterback Dan Marino. Drafted in 1983, Marino shattered passing records with his quick release and cannon arm. Though he never won a Super Bowl, he helped turn the Dolphins into a glamorous, must-watch franchise. New Orleans Saints, founded 1967. The New Orleans Saints were born on a day that felt almost scripted. November 1st, 1966, All Saints Day. It was a poetic coincidence that helped inspire the team's name, linking it forever with the city's deep Catholic roots, jazz heritage, and cultural flair. New Orleans had been lobbying for a professional football team for years. The city already had a rich sporting tradition and a population passionate about college football. When the NFL and AFL announced their merger in the mid-1960s, Congress insisted on expanding the league to new markets. That pressure helped fast-track New Orleans into the NFL. The franchise was awarded to businessman John W. Mecom Jr., and the team was officially introduced in 1967. Their black and gold colors symbolize the region's ties to oil, black gold, and wealth, while their fleur-de-lis logo drew directly from French heritage and the city's European influence. But while the Saints' branding was iconic from the start, their play on the field was anything but. New Orleans became known as the lovable losers of the league. In fact, it took 20 seasons before the Saints had their first winning record, not until 1987. The team's early years were marked by heartbreak, bizarre moments, and devoted fans who showed up week after week, even when many jokingly wore paper bags over their heads, calling themselves the Aints. But the true transformation came in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina in 2005. The Superdome was severely damaged, and the franchise was temporarily relocated. Many questioned whether the Saints would ever return. Then came 2006. New head coach Sean Payton, quarterback Drew Brees, and a rejuvenated city rallied around each other. The Saints returned to New Orleans that season and made the NFC Championship, just 1 year after devastation. 3 years later, in 2009, they completed the dream, winning Super Bowl 44 and delivering the city its first championship. Cincinnati Bengals, founded 1968. The Cincinnati Bengals were founded as part of a strategic master plan, one created by Paul Brown, one of the most legendary figures in football history. By the late 1960s, Paul Brown had already done it all. He had founded and coached the Cleveland Browns, revolutionized the game with film study, playbooks, and organized coaching staffs, and won multiple championships. But after being controversially fired by the Browns in 1963, he wasn't done with football. He was just getting started, again. When the AFL announced its final expansion team before the merger with the NFL, Browns saw an opening. A new franchise was awarded to Cincinnati in 1967, set to begin play in 1968, and Paul Brown was placed in charge as both part owner and head coach. The name Bengals was chosen as a tribute to a previous pro team from the city in the 1930s. But it also gave the new franchise a strong, fierce identity. The Bengals began play in the American Football League in 1968 and transitioned to the NFL with the 1970 merger. Despite being a new team, they were competitive quickly. Brown's experience and eye for talent gave Cincinnati a massive advantage. In 1970, their first year in the NFL, the Bengals won their division and made the playoffs. A decade later, they became one of the most exciting teams in football under head coach Forrest Gregg and quarterback Ken Anderson, reaching Super Bowl 16 in the 1981 season. Though they lost to Joe Montana's 49ers, the Bengals were now a serious contender. The next few decades brought inconsistency and disappointment, a stretch known painfully by fans as the Bungles era. But everything changed with the arrival of Joe Burrow in 2020. With Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and a rebuilt defense, the Bengals made a stunning Super Bowl run in the 2021 season, falling just short against the Rams, but proving Cincinnati was back among the NFL's elite. Seattle Seahawks, founded 1976. In the 1970s, the NFL was expanding its footprint, and Seattle, a booming port city with no pro football team, emerged as a top target. The league awarded an expansion franchise to a group of Seattle businessmen led by Lloyd W. Nordstrom, the department store heir, in 1974. The team would begin play in 1976, along with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The name Seahawks was chosen through a public contest. Out of over 20,000 submissions, Seahawks was selected for its regional relevance and aggressive tone. The name perfectly fit the Pacific Northwest's rugged coastal identity. The Seahawks played their first season at the Kingdom, a concrete dome that echoed with noise and quickly earned a reputation as one of the loudest stadiums in football. The team struggled early on, but by the early 1980s, they were turning heads with young talent and a passionate fan base that would soon become legendary. Seattle's early stars included wide receiver Steve Largent, who would go on to become one of the greatest pass catchers in NFL history. Under head coach Chuck Knox, the Seahawks reached their first AFC championship game in 1983, led by a tough defense and bruising running backs like Kurt Warner. After bouncing between ups and downs for decades, and even switching conferences from the AFC to the NFC in 2002 due to realignment, the franchise's true rise came under head coach Pete Carroll. By the early 2010s, the Seahawks had built one of the NFL's most dominant defenses, nicknamed the Legion of Boom. With stars like Richard Sherman, Cam Chancellor, Earl Thomas, and Bobby Wagner, paired with the electric, undersized quarterback Russell Wilson and powerhouse running back Marshawn Lynch, the Seahawks became an unstoppable force. In 2013, they reached the pinnacle, dominating the Denver Broncos in Super Bowl 48 to win their first championship in franchise history. They returned the next year, but fell in heartbreaking fashion to the Patriots after throwing the ball on the 1-yard line instead of giving it to Lynch, a decision still debated today. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, founded 1976. Awarded as part of the same 1976 expansion that birthed the Seattle Seahawks, the Buccaneers became the first NFL franchise based in Florida. The team was founded by wealthy businessman Hugh Culverhouse, who saw opportunity in the rapidly growing Tampa Bay area, a region passionate about football, but with no pro team to support. The Bucs' name was inspired by Florida's pirate history, particularly the legend surrounding the pirate Jose Gaspar, who was said to have prowled the Gulf Coast. The team's original mascot, Buccaneer Bruce, and their creamsicle orange uniforms quickly became iconic, and, at times, infamous. Their early seasons were brutal. The Buccaneers lost their first 26 games, setting an NFL record for futility. First head coach John McKay, known for his dry wit, once responded to a question about his team's execution by saying, "I'm in favor of it." But things turned around faster than expected. By 1979, just 3 seasons after their first win, the Buccaneers made the NFC Championship game, led by a ferocious defense starring Leroy Selman and a solid run game behind Ricky Bell. Tampa had gone from laughingstock to contender. Unfortunately, success didn't last. The 1980s and early 1990s were filled with instability, poor drafts, and endless coaching changes. The team became synonymous with losing, until everything changed in the late 90s. Under head coach Tony Dungy, the Buccaneers built one of the NFL's most feared defenses. With stars like Warren Sapp, Derek Brooks, John Lynch, and Rondé Barber, they laid the foundation for a winning culture. But it was John Gruden, hired in 2002, who brought it all together. In Super Bowl 37, the Buccaneers demolished the Oakland Raiders with a legendary defensive performance, claiming their first championship. Tampa had finally reached the mountaintop with defense, swagger, and redemption. Fast forward to 2020, and history repeated itself in even grander fashion. The Bucs signed Tom Brady, assembled a veteran-heavy roster, and won Super Bowl 55 in their own stadium, the first team in NFL history to win a Super Bowl at home. Carolina Panthers, founded 1995. Awarded in 1993 and beginning play in 1995, the Panthers were the result of businessman Jerry Richardson's decade-long campaign to bring professional football to the Carolinas. Richardson, a former NFL player turned fast food magnate, pitched the NFL a vision of a regional franchise, one that would unite North and South Carolina under a single team. Charlotte, North Carolina, was chosen as the home base. It was a city on the rise, with growing corporate power and sports potential. The team was initially based at Clemson University's Memorial Stadium, while their new home, Bank of America Stadium, was being built in downtown Charlotte. From the beginning, the Panthers did something unheard of for an expansion team. They won. Under head coach Dom Capers, Carolina finished their second season in 1996 with a 12-4 record, winning the NFC West and advancing all the way to the NFC Championship game. It was the fastest rise to prominence in NFL history at the time, and it instantly put the Panthers on the map. The early stars included linebacker Sam Mills, who coined the team's enduring slogan, "Keep Pounding," a mantra that still echoes through the stadium every Sunday. In 2003, they reached Super Bowl 38, narrowly losing to the New England Patriots in one of the most competitive Super Bowls ever played. The next decade brought another defining era, the Cam Newton years. Drafted first overall in 2011, Newton electrified the league with his size, speed, and charisma. In 2015, they went 15-1, steamrolling their way to Super Bowl 50. Newton won NFL MVP, and Carolina became the face of the league for a season. But once again, the story ended in Super Bowl heartbreak, this time to the Denver Broncos. Jacksonville Jaguars, founded 1995. The Jacksonville Jaguars were one of the biggest surprises in NFL expansion history, a small market team that beat out bigger cities and quickly became competitive on the field. In the early 1990s, the NFL was looking to expand, and cities like St. Louis, Baltimore, and Memphis were considered frontrunners. But in a major upset, Jacksonville, Florida, a mid-sized city with no major professional sports team, was awarded a franchise in 1993, set to begin play in 1995 alongside the Carolina Panthers. The team was founded by Wayne Weaver, a businessman from the shoe industry, and he pushed hard to convince the league that Jacksonville could support an NFL team. His pitch worked, and when the announcement was made, many around the league were stunned. The Jaguars debuted in 1995 under head coach Tom Coughlin, who had total control of football operations. Expectations were modest. Most expansion teams take years to build, but Jacksonville broke the mold. By 1996, in just their second season, the Jaguars shocked the league by going 9-7 and making the playoffs. Even more shocking, they upset the Buffalo Bills and Denver Broncos on the road to reach the AFC Championship game. It was one of the most improbable playoff runs ever for such a young team. But after that early burst of success, the 2000s were more difficult. The team struggled with roster turnover, coaching changes, and declining attendance. Then came a resurgence in 2017, led by a fearsome defense nicknamed Saxonville. Featuring Jalen Ramsey and Calais Campbell, the Jaguars made a run all the way to the AFC Championship game, nearly taking down the Patriots in Foxborough. Today, with Trevor Lawrence at quarterback and Doug Peterson as head coach, Jacksonville is once again building something special. Baltimore Ravens, founded 1996. The Baltimore Ravens weren't born like most NFL franchises. They were ripped from the heart of another city, the result of one of the most controversial moves in league history. In the mid-1990s, Baltimore had been without an NFL team for over a decade, ever since the Colts packed up and left for Indianapolis in the middle of the night in 1984. The city had tried everything to get a team back, including failed bids for expansion. But their second chance came not through the league, but through relocation. In 1996, Cleveland Browns owner Art Modell shocked the football world by announcing he would move the Browns to Baltimore. The backlash was instant. Cleveland fans were furious, the NFL was under pressure, and lawsuits flew from every direction. The compromise? Cleveland would get to keep the Browns' name, colors, and history. Modell would move the players, coaches, and front office to Baltimore, but they would become an entirely new franchise, the Baltimore Ravens. The name Ravens was inspired by Edgar Allan Poe, the famous poet who lived and died in Baltimore, and whose iconic poem, The Raven, became a symbol of the city's literary legacy. From the start, the Ravens built their identity on defense. In 1996, they drafted Jonathan Ogden, a Hall of Fame left tackle, and Ray Lewis, a linebacker, who would become the heart and soul of the franchise. Over the next few years, they added more defensive legends like Ed Reed and Terrell Suggs, crafting one of the greatest units the game has ever seen. By 2000, that defense reached historic levels. The Ravens allowed just 165 points in the entire regular season, the fewest ever in a 16-game season, and rode that dominance to a blowout win in Super Bowl 35, crushing the New York Giants. They would win another Super Bowl in 2012 in the final season of Ray Lewis's legendary career. This time, they were led by quarterback Joe Flacco, who put together a flawless playoff run. In recent years, Baltimore has continued to innovate. In 2018, they drafted quarterback Lamar Jackson, whose electrifying speed and unique play style earned him NFL MVP. Once again, the Ravens had a star and a new era. Houston Texans, founded 2002. The Houston Texans are the youngest franchise in the NFL, but their creation filled a void left by heartbreak. For decades, Houston was home to the Oilers, a proud AFL original team known for stars like Earl Campbell, Warren Moon, and one of the most passionate fan bases in football. But in 1997, after years of stadium issues and declining attendance, the Oilers moved to Tennessee, becoming the Titans. The city was stunned. Houston, a football-mad town, was suddenly without a team. That didn't last long. Enter Bob McNair, a billionaire businessman with a vision. Determined to bring football back to Houston, McNair led a successful bid for an expansion franchise, beating out cities like Los Angeles. The NFL officially awarded Houston a new team in 1999, set to begin play in 2002. The name Texans was chosen to reflect state pride, a tribute to the identity and culture of Texas itself. The team's bull logo, star emblem, and red, white, and blue color scheme all emphasized that this was more than just a football team. It was a Texas brand. The Texans played their first game on September 8, 2002, and made an immediate statement, upsetting the Dallas Cowboys in their franchise debut. Early years were rocky. The team struggled to find stability and suffered through multiple losing seasons. But the pieces started to come together in the late 2000s. The Texans drafted Andre Johnson, a dominant wide receiver, and later found their franchise pass rusher in J.J. Watt, who would go on to win 3 Defensive Player of the Year awards. Under head coach Gary Kubiak and later Bill O'Brien, Houston became a playoff regular in the 2010s. With Watt anchoring the defense and stars like Arian Foster and DeAndre Hopkins on offense, the Texans built a strong identity. In 2017, they drafted quarterback Deshaun Watson, who added explosive playmaking to their offense and helped lead multiple playoff runs. But turmoil followed, a series of off-field controversies, front office instability, and years of roster mismanagement set the team back. Now, with C.J. Stroud at quarterback and DeMeco Ryans as head coach, the Texans are entering a new era. Stroud's breakout rookie season and the team's rapid turnaround have reignited hope in Houston, proving that even the NFL's youngest team can build something special, fast. If you enjoyed this, I'm going to be posting a lot here, so it would mean a lot if you subscribed. Thanks for watching. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Bo Jackson. In 1986, the Buccaneers held the first overall pick, and they used it on Bo Jackson, the most electrifying athlete in the country. Fresh off a Heisman Trophy at Auburn, Jackson had the size of a power back and the speed of a sprinter. Scouts believed he was a once-in-a-generation talent who could transform a franchise overnight. For Tampa Bay, desperate to escape years of losing, it seemed like the perfect pick. But from the start, the relationship was broken. Before the draft, the Buccaneers flew Jackson on a private jet to visit the team. That trip, arranged without NCAA clearance, cost him his final season of college baseball eligibility. To Jackson, it felt like sabotage. He believed Tampa had intentionally misled him, and he made it clear he would never play it down for them. The Buccaneers ignored his warnings and drafted him anyway, convinced that no athlete would really walk away from being the #1 pick in the NFL draft. But Bo Jackson was different. Instead of signing, he chose baseball, joining the Kansas City Royals and showing the world he could be a star in another sport. The Raiders later took a flyer on him in the 7th round of the 1987 draft, and Jackson became a two-sport phenomenon, breaking off legendary runs in the NFL while still hitting home runs in Major League Baseball. The Buccaneers, meanwhile, were left with nothing to show for their top pick. It remains one of the most infamous draft blunders in league history. Tampa Bay used the first overall pick on a player who never wore their uniform, Dallas Cowboys, David LaFleur. In the 1997 NFL draft, the Dallas Cowboys were looking to reload their dynasty roster. They had won 3 Super Bowls in the 1990s, but their championship window was starting to close. With the 22nd overall pick, they selected LSU tight end David LaFleur, a big-bodied target who they believed could become the next Jay Novacek and keep Troy Aikman's offense humming. At 6 feet 7 inches and nearly 270 pounds, LaFleur had the frame to dominate. Dallas envisioned him as a red zone nightmare and a reliable safety valve for Aikman, but the production never came. Injuries limited his development, and when he was healthy, he struggled to separate from defenders and establish himself as a consistent receiver. Over 4 seasons, his best year came in 1999, when he caught 35 passes for 322 yards and 7 touchdowns. Beyond that flash, he never topped 200 yards in another season. For a first-round pick on a team still loaded with talent, the lack of impact was glaring. The Cowboys had hoped LaFleur would be a cornerstone for their next era, but by 2001, he was out of football entirely. Dallas spent a premium pick on a player who never became more than a role piece. New England Patriots, Kenneth Sims. In 1982, the New England Patriots held the first overall pick and chose defensive lineman Kenneth Sims out of Texas. At the time, Sims was seen as a safe and dominant selection. He had been an All-American, won the Lombardi Award, and looks like the kind of player who could anchor a defensive line for the next decade. But the reality was far different. Sims battled injuries almost immediately, missing time with knee problems, and never staying on the field long enough to build momentum. When he was healthy, he failed to make the kind of impact expected from a top pick. Over 8 seasons in New England, he started just 74 games, finishing his career with only 17 sacks, a number many top pass rushers eclipse in a single great season. To make matters worse, questions about his conditioning and work ethic followed him throughout his time with the Patriots. For a team looking to build a foundation piece with the #1 pick, Sims became a symbol of wasted potential. By 1989, he was out of the league, and his name became permanently tied to one of the Patriots' darkest draft decisions. By the way, I'm going to be posting a lot here, so it would mean a lot if you subscribed and dropped a like for the algorithm. Atlanta Falcons, Andre Bruce. In 1988, the Atlanta Falcons owned the #1 overall pick and chose Auburn linebacker Andre Bruce. At the time, he was compared to Lawrence Taylor, a dominant do-it-all defender who could rush the passer, drop into coverage, and change the game on every snap. The Falcons believed they had drafted the cornerstone of their defense for the next decade, but Bruce never came close to those expectations. From the beginning, he struggled to find a true position. Atlanta moved him around the defense, hoping to unlock his potential, but he never excelled at any one role. As a pass rusher, he lacked the explosiveness to consistently beat tackles. As an inside linebacker, he didn't have the instincts to dominate in traffic. The comparisons to Taylor quickly vanished. Over 11 seasons in the NFL, Bruce managed just 32 sacks. He became a serviceable role player, but never the superstar the Falcons envisioned for a #1 pick expected to transform the franchise. His production was a massive disappointment. For Atlanta, the decision stung even more because the late 1980s were a period of struggle for the franchise. Drafting a generational defender could have changed their trajectory. Houston Texans, David Carr. In 2002, the Houston Texans were entering the NFL as an expansion franchise, and with the first overall pick in their inaugural draft, they selected quarterback David Carr out of Fresno State. He was big, athletic, had a strong arm, and was supposed to be the face of the franchise. the player who would carry the Texans from day one. But the situation he was thrown into was almost impossible. The Texans were building their roster from scratch, and the offensive line was one of the weakest in the league. In Carr's rookie season alone, he was sacked 76 times, an NFL record that still stands. He was hit so often that it stunted his development, as his mechanics broke down and his confidence was shaken. Instead of growing into the role, Carr spent most of his time running for his life. The Texans tried to surround him with talent, but the damage had already been done. Over 5 seasons in Houston, Carr threw 59 touchdowns against 65 interceptions, never led the team to a winning record, and was eventually released after 2006. He bounced around the league as a backup for several years, but never came close to being the star quarterback Houston thought they drafted. For a young franchise, whiffing on the #1 pick at quarterback was a crushing blow. Chicago Bears, Mitchell Trubisky. In 2017, the Chicago Bears made one of the boldest draft moves of the decade. They traded up to the 2nd overall pick to select quarterback Mitchell Trubisky out of North Carolina. It was a shocking decision, not only because Trubisky had started just 13 games in college, but because the Bears passed on other top prospects, including Patrick Mahomes and Deshaun Watson. The message was clear. Chicago believed Trubisky would be their long-awaited franchise quarterback. The reality was far different. As a rookie, Trubisky showed flashes of potential, but struggled with accuracy and decision-making. In 2018, under new head coach Matt Nagy, he had his best season, throwing for over 3,200 yards and helping lead the Bears to a 12-4 record. He made the Pro Bowl as an alternate, but even during that run, his limitations were obvious. The defense carried the team, and Trubisky's inconsistency kept the offense from reaching its ceiling. By 2019, the cracks widened. He regressed sharply, missing open throws, failing to read defenses, and looking overwhelmed in big moments. The Bears declined his 5th-year option in 2020, and by the end of the season, his time in Chicago was over. For the Bears, the pick was devastating. Passing on Mahomes, who developed into a generational superstar, turned the decision into one of the most infamous draft busts in NFL history. Buffalo Bills, Mike Williams. In 2002, the Buffalo Bills had the 4th overall pick and chose offensive tackle Mike Williams out of Texas. At the time, he was viewed as a can't-miss prospect, a massive, powerful lineman with the athleticism to anchor an offense for years. Buffalo believed he would be the cornerstone of their line and the protector of their quarterback for the next decade. But Williams never came close to reaching that level. He struggled with conditioning from the start, arriving to camp overweight and unable to consistently handle NFL speed off the edge. The technique that made him dominant in college didn't translate, and defenders regularly beat him with quickness and leverage. The Bills shifted him between tackle and guard, hoping to find a better fit, but he failed to excel at either position. Over 4 years in Buffalo, Williams never became the dominant lineman they envisioned. By 2006, he was released outright. He briefly resurfaced in Jacksonville as a backup, but was out of the league soon after. For the Bills, the pick was especially painful because of who came after. Players like Bryant McKinnie, Dwight Freeney, and Ed Reed all went later in the 1st round, leaving Buffalo stuck with one of the most disappointing top 5 picks of the decade, New York Giants, John Hicks. In 1974, the New York Giants used the 3rd overall pick on offensive lineman John Hicks out of Ohio State. Hicks had been a dominant force in college, winning both the Outland Trophy and the Lombardi Award, and was expected to become the anchor of New York's offensive line for years to come. But his NFL career never got off the ground. Hicks struggled to adjust to the speed and power of the pro game. While he had been overwhelming at Ohio State, he lacked the mobility and technique to handle NFL defenders consistently. Injuries compounded the problem, limiting his development and availability. After just 4 seasons, Hicks was out of the league entirely. He never made a Pro Bowl, never established himself as a long-term starter, and never came close to meeting the lofty expectations of a top 3 pick. For the Giants, the miss was part of a difficult stretch in the 1970s, where the franchise cycled through poor draft decisions and losing seasons. Hicks stands out as one of the most disappointing high draft picks in team history. Baltimore Ravens, Matt Elam. In 2013, the Baltimore Ravens were fresh off a Super Bowl win and looking to reload their defense after losing Ed Reed and Ray Lewis in the same offseason. With the final pick of the first round, they selected safety Matt Elam out of Florida. Elam had been a star in college. At Florida, he was a first-team All-American, known for his physicality, hard-hitting style, and ability to play in the box. Scouts praised his energy, toughness, and leadership, and the Ravens believed he could step into Reed's shoes and be their next defensive cornerstone. But from the moment he entered the league, things never clicked. At just 5 feet 10 inches and 208 pounds, Elam lacked the size to match up with bigger tight ends, and didn't have the range to cover deep like Reed. His aggressive play style often backfired, as he was caught out of position and gave up big plays. He started 15 games as a rookie, but his impact was minimal, recording just 77 tackles and 1 interception. In 2014, his struggles in coverage became more glaring, and by 2015, he tore his biceps in training camp, costing him the entire season. By the time he returned in 2016, he was buried on the depth chart. Off-field issues further derailed his career, including an arrest in 2017 that led the Ravens to cut ties completely. Elam never recorded more than 1 interception in a season, never became the defensive leader Baltimore envisioned, and was out of the NFL after just 4 years. Kansas City Chiefs, Todd Blackledge. In 1983, the Kansas City Chiefs had the 7th overall pick in what would later be remembered as the greatest quarterback draft class of all time. John Elway, Jim Kelly, and Dan Marino were all available that year, but the Chiefs used their pick on Todd Blackledge, the quarterback from Penn State. At the time, Blackledge looked like a smart choice. He had just led Penn State to a national championship, was viewed as a polished leader, and had the size and arm strength that NFL teams valued. Kansas City believed they were getting their franchise quarterback of the future, but Blackledge never lived up to the expectations. He started just 4 games as a rookie and immediately struggled with accuracy and turnovers. Over the next 5 seasons in Kansas City, he never secured the full-time starting job, stuck behind Bill Kenny and later Steve DeBerg. When he did play, the results were poor. He finished his Chiefs career with 26 touchdowns against 32 interceptions, never throwing for more than 1,700 yards in a season. In 1989, Blackledge signed with the Pittsburgh Steelers, where he served as a backup for 2 years before retiring. By the time his career ended, the rest of the 1983 quarterback class had already begun carving out Hall of Fame legacies, while Blackledge was remembered as the outlier, the one first-round quarterback who never became a star. Arizona Cardinals, Andre Wadsworth. In 1998, the Arizona Cardinals held the 3rd overall pick and drafted Florida State defensive end Andre Wadsworth. At the time, he was considered one of the safest prospects in the draft. Wadsworth had been a dominant force in college, earning All-American honors and piling up 16 sacks his senior year. Many analysts believed he would be an instant Pro Bowl caliber pass rusher in the NFL, and early on it looked like they might be right. As a rookie, Wadsworth started all 16 games for Arizona, recorded 5 sacks, and played a major role in helping the Cardinals reach the playoffs for the first time in 50 years. He was powerful off the edge, quick off the snap, and seemed like a building block for a franchise desperate for defensive talent. But then came the injuries. Wadsworth began suffering from severe knee problems after his rookie season. Multiple surgeries followed, including microfracture procedures, which at the time often ended careers. His explosiveness disappeared, and by 2000, he was out of football entirely after just 3 seasons. Attempts to make comebacks in later years never panned out. For the Cardinals, it was a crushing blow. A top 3 pick who looked like a future star had his career derailed almost instantly. Instead of building their defense around Wadsworth for the next decade, Arizona was left searching for answers. Philadelphia Eagles, Leroy Keys. In 1969, the Philadelphia Eagles owned the 3rd overall pick and used it on Leroy Keys, a 2-way star from Purdue. Keys was one of the most dynamic players in the country during his college career. He finished 3rd in the Heisman voting in 1968 and was a consensus All-American as both a running back and defensive back. With his versatility and athleticism, the Eagles believed he could become their next great offensive weapon. But Keys never lived up to the billing. The Eagles initially drafted him as a running back, expecting him to carry their offense. In his rookie year, he managed just 310 rushing yards on 124 carries, averaging a meager 2.5 yards per attempt. He struggled to adjust to the speed and physicality of NFL defenses, and he never showed the explosiveness that made him a college superstar. By his second season, the Eagles tried him at wide receiver, hoping his hands and versatility might translate better there. It didn't. Keys caught only a handful of passes, and his role in the offense continued to shrink. After just 4 years in Philadelphia, he was traded to the Kansas City Chiefs, where he lasted one more season before being out of the league entirely. For the Eagles, the miss was especially painful because the very next pick after Keys was Hall of Fame defensive tackle Joe Green, who became the anchor of Pittsburgh's dynasty in the 1970s. Passing on Green to take Keys left Philadelphia with a wasted top 3 pick, while their in-state rivals built one of the greatest defenses of all time. Washington Commanders, Heath Shuler. In 1994, Washington was desperate for a franchise quarterback. With the 3rd overall pick, they selected Heath Shuler out of Tennessee, a big-armed passer who had been a Heisman finalist and was expected to quickly develop into the leader of their offense. Coming off a decorated college career, Shuler was supposed to be the long-term answer at a position Washington had struggled to solidify since the Joe Theismann era. But almost immediately, things went sideways. As a rookie, Shuler held out for a lengthy contract negotiation that kept him out of training camp. The missed time left him behind on learning the playbook, and when he finally got on the field, he looked overwhelmed. He threw 12 interceptions to just 10 touchdowns and completed only 45% of his passes. His mechanics broke down under pressure, and his confidence never recovered. By his second season, he had lost the starting job to Gus Ferrata, a 7th-round pick who quickly outplayed him. The boos from Washington fans grew louder, and Shuler's reputation as a bust was sealed. In 1997, he was traded to the New Orleans Saints, but his struggles continued. A foot injury cut his career short after just 5 seasons. For Washington, the pick was a disaster. They invested a top 3 selection in a quarterback who never came close to meeting expectations. Instead of building around a franchise leader, the team was forced to start over yet again, prolonging their years of instability. Jacksonville Jaguars, Blaine Gabbert. In 2011, the Jacksonville Jaguars were searching for their franchise quarterback, and with the 10th overall pick, they drafted Blaine Gabbert out of Missouri. On draft night, the Jaguars traded up to get him, convinced his size, athleticism, and arm strength would make him the answer under center. At just 21 years old, Gabbert was supposed to be the long-term face of the franchise. But from the moment he stepped on the field, it was clear the transition wasn't going to be smooth. Gabbert was thrown into the starting lineup as a rookie behind a weak offensive line, and with very few playmakers around him. He looked overwhelmed, holding the ball too long and struggling with pocket presence. He took 40 sacks as a rookie, lost confidence, and finished with just 12 touchdowns to 11 interceptions, while completing under 51% of his passes. The problems never went away. Over his 3 seasons in Jacksonville, he went 5-22 as a starter, threw more interceptions than touchdowns, and often looked lost running the offense. His mechanics broke down under pressure, and instead of developing, he regressed. By 2014, the Jaguars had moved on, trading him to the San Francisco 49ers for a 6th-round pick. Gabbert has since carved out a lengthy career as a backup across the league, even winning a Super Bowl ring as Tom Brady's reserve in Tampa Bay. Cleveland Browns, Tim Couch. In 1999, the Cleveland Browns returned to the NFL as an expansion team, and with the very first pick in their franchise reboot, they drafted quarterback Tim Couch out of Kentucky. Couch was one of the most prolific passers in college football, setting SEC records with his accuracy and arm strength. For a franchise desperate for stability and identity, Couch was supposed to be the foundation, but the Browns were not ready to support a young quarterback. The expansion roster was thin, the offensive line was among the worst in football, and Couch was thrown into the fire immediately. As a rookie, he was sacked 56 times, hit countless more, and forced into bad habits. While he showed flashes of toughness and leadership, the constant punishment stunted his development. By 2002, Couch briefly led the Browns to a playoff berth, but even that season highlighted the issues. He threw 18 interceptions to just 18 touchdowns and missed the playoff game with an injury. Durability became a recurring theme. Couch broke his leg in 2000, suffered shoulder problems later, and never played a full 16-game season. After 5 years in Cleveland, he finished with 64 touchdowns against 67 interceptions, and the team released him in 2004. Attempts at comebacks with Green Bay and Jacksonville never stuck, and his career was effectively over at 27 years old. Carolina Panthers, Ray Caruth. In 1997, the Carolina Panthers used the 27th overall pick on wide receiver Ray Caruth out of Colorado. At the time, Caruth was seen as one of the most polished receivers in the draft. He had great hands, crisp routes, and explosive speed. Carolina believed they were adding a future star to an already promising young franchise that had just reached the NFC Championship in only its second season. On the field, Caruth started strong. As a rookie, he caught 44 passes for 545 yards and 4 touchdowns, earning all-rookie honors and validating the Panthers' investment. But injuries and off-field issues quickly derailed his career. He missed most of the 1998 season with a broken foot, and in 1999, his production dipped again. Then came one of the darkest moments in NFL history. In November 1999, Caruth was arrested and later convicted in connection with the murder of his pregnant girlfriend, Shericka Adams. The crime shocked the sports world and ended Caruth's career immediately. He was sentenced to prison in 2001, serving nearly 2 decades before his release in 2018. For the Panthers, the pick became a nightmare scenario. A first-round receiver who once showed real promise became infamous for one of the most disturbing off-field tragedies the league has ever seen. San Francisco 49ers, Trey Lance. In 2021, the San Francisco 49ers made one of the boldest moves in modern draft history. They traded 3 first-round picks and a third-rounder to move up to the 3rd overall pick, selecting quarterback Trey Lance out of North Dakota State. Lance was raw, but the upside was tantalizing. At 6 feet 4 inches with a rocket arm, plus elite mobility and intelligence, he was billed as the perfect modern quarterback who could thrive in Kyle Shanahan's system. The 49ers envisioned him as the long-term successor to Jimmy Garoppolo and the missing piece that could turn a talented roster into a dynasty. But things never went according to plan. Lance entered the league with only 17 starts at the FCS level, and that lack of experience showed. As a rookie, he played sparingly behind Garoppolo, starting just 2 games and flashing inconsistency. In 2022, when the 49ers finally handed him the reins, disaster struck. Lance suffered a season-ending ankle injury in Week 2. By the time he returned in 2023, he had barely played in 2 years. Meanwhile, the 49ers found success elsewhere. Garoppolo held the team steady, and then Brock Purdy, the last pick in the 2022 draft, became an unlikely breakout star. With Purdy entrenched as the starter, Lance's opportunity evaporated. In August 2023, San Francisco officially gave up, trading him to the Dallas Cowboys for a 4th-round pick. Tennessee Titans, Isaiah Wilson. In 2020, the Tennessee Titans used the 29th overall pick on offensive tackle Isaiah Wilson out of Georgia. Wilson was a massive prospect at 6 feet 6 inches and over 350 pounds. And the Titans believed he could be their long-term answer at right tackle. Coming off an AFC Championship game appearance, Tennessee saw him as a piece to solidify their offensive line and keep Derrick Henry's rushing attack dominant for years. But Wilson's NFL career collapsed almost immediately. As a rookie, he played just 4 total snaps all season. Off the field, he quickly developed a reputation for immaturity and poor discipline. He was placed on the COVID-19 list twice, was suspended for violating team rules, and was arrested for a DUI. Coaches publicly questioned his commitment, and by the end of the year, he was already on his way out. In 2021, the Titans traded him to the Miami Dolphins for a late-round pick swap. Within 3 days, Miami released him after more off-field issues surfaced. Just 1 year after being a first-round pick, Wilson was effectively out of the NFL. Minnesota Vikings, Troy Williamson. In 2005, the Minnesota Vikings were reeling after trading away Randy Moss, one of the most dominant wide receivers in NFL history. With the 7th overall pick in the draft, they hoped to replace him by selecting Troy Williamson, a wideout from South Carolina. Williamson was known for his blazing speed. He ran a 4.3 in the 40-yard dash, and the Vikings believed he could stretch the field and bring back the deep threat that Moss had provided for years. But speed was about the only thing that translated. From the start, Williamson struggled with the basics of being an NFL receiver. He had trouble running precise routes, didn't create separation against physical corners, and most infamously, dropped passes at an alarming rate. His hands never caught up to his athletic ability, and the flashes of potential were few and far between. Over 3 seasons in Minnesota, Williamson managed just 79 catches for 1,067 yards and 3 touchdowns. He never topped 455 yards in a single year. Frustrated with his lack of progress, the Vikings traded him to the Jacksonville Jaguars in 2008 for a 6th-round pick, and within 2 years, he was out of the league entirely. Detroit Lions, Andre Ware. In 1990, the Detroit Lions held the 7th overall pick and used it on quarterback Andre Ware out of Houston. Ware had just won the Heisman Trophy after throwing for over 4,600 yards and 46 touchdowns in Houston's run-and-shoot offense. He was one of the most prolific college passers ever at that time, and Detroit believed his arm talent would translate to the NFL. But once he reached the pros, everything unraveled. The Lions ran a run-heavy offense built around Barry Sanders, and head coach Wayne Fontes never fully committed to tailoring the scheme to Ware's strengths. The run-and-shoot system that showcased him in college wasn't used in Detroit, and Ware struggled to adapt to a more traditional NFL offense. When he did see the field, he looked overwhelmed, completing just 51% of his passes and throwing only 5 touchdowns in 4 seasons with the team. Ware never earned the starting job, spending most of his career behind Rodney Peete and Eric Kramer. By 1994, he was out of the league, and attempts to revive his career in the CFL provided only brief flashes of the player he had been in college. For Detroit, the pick was another chapter in a long history of quarterback disappointments. Miami Dolphins, Dion Jordan. In 2013, the Miami Dolphins shocked everyone by trading up to the 3rd overall pick to select defensive end Dion Jordan out of Oregon. Jordan was one of the most athletic players in the draft, a 6'6" edge rusher who ran like a linebacker and had the versatility to drop into coverage. Miami believed they were getting a game-changing defender who could terrorize quarterbacks for years, but Jordan never came close to meeting those expectations. As a rookie, he recorded just 2 sacks in limited playing time. Coaches struggled to find the right role for him. He was too light to dominate as a pure pass rusher and too raw to be trusted in coverage. Instead of developing, his career unraveled with repeated suspensions for violating the league's substance abuse policy. Between 2014 and 2016, he played in only 12 games, missing the entire 2015 season. By the time he returned, Miami had moved on. He was released in 2017 after 4 seasons, finishing his Dolphins career with just 3 total sacks. Jordan later caught on with the Seahawks and Raiders in reserve roles, but he never came close to resembling the player Miami thought they had drafted. Denver Broncos, Ted Gregory. In 1988, the Denver Broncos were coming off back-to-back Super Bowl appearances and wanted to add more strength to their defensive line. With the 26th overall pick, they drafted defensive tackle Ted Gregory out of Syracuse. Gregory had been a standout in college, known for his quickness and disruptive ability inside. On paper, it looked like a strong late first-round selection for a team already contending, but the Broncos quickly realized they had made a massive mistake. Gregory had been listed at 6 feet 1 inch, 280 pounds, but when he arrived in Denver, he measured closer to 5 feet 9 inches and was undersized compared to most NFL linemen. Scouts had overlooked the discrepancy because of his production at Syracuse, but once he lined up against pro-level talent, his lack of size and strength became glaring. To make matters worse, Gregory suffered a knee injury early in training camp, further limiting any chance of development. He never played a single game for the Broncos. Before the regular season even began, Denver traded him to the New Orleans Saints, effectively giving up on their first-round pick just months after drafting him. Gregory played 1 year in New Orleans, starting 3 games, but was out of the league by 1989. Green Bay Packers, Rich Campbell. In 1981, the Green Bay Packers used the 6th overall pick on quarterback Rich Campbell out of California. Campbell had put up strong numbers in college, throwing for over 7,000 yards, and was considered one of the most accurate passers in the draft. Green Bay believed he could be the long-term answer at quarterback and revive a franchise that had been struggling since the Lombardi era. But Campbell never came close to living up to those expectations. From the start, scouts' concerns about his arm strength proved true. He lacked the velocity to consistently drive the ball downfield, and in Green Bay's system, he looked overmatched against NFL defenses. Coaches quickly lost faith in him, and he spent most of his 4 years with the team buried on the depth chart. When he did play, the results were disappointing. He attempted just 68 passes in his entire NFL career, throwing for 386 yards, with 3 touchdowns and 9 interceptions. By 1984, the Packers moved on, releasing Campbell after just 4 seasons. He never played another snap in the NFL. For a team that had bypassed future stars like Ronnie Lott and Mike Singletary to draft him, the miss was costly. Los Angeles Rams, Lawrence Phillips. In 1996, the St. Louis Rams took running back Lawrence Phillips with the 6th overall pick in the draft. On talent alone, the pick made sense. At Nebraska, Phillips had been one of the most explosive players in the country, rushing for over 1,700 yards in 1994 and helping the Cornhuskers win a national championship. He had size, speed, and power, and scouts believed he could be a generational back in the NFL. But Phillips also came into the league with serious off-field concerns. He had already faced legal issues and suspensions in college, and the Rams' decision to draft him was criticized as a gamble. Unfortunately for the Rams, those concerns quickly proved justified. On the field, Phillips never delivered. He rushed for just 632 yards as a rookie, showing flashes of his talent, but struggling with consistency. He often clashed with coaches, missed assignments, and failed to adjust to the professionalism of the NFL. Off the field, his legal troubles continued to mount, leading to suspensions and distracting from any chance of development. By 1997, less than 2 seasons after drafting him, the Rams released Phillips outright. He bounced around with the Dolphins and 49ers briefly, but his career never recovered. They passed on future Hall of Famers like Marvin Harrison and Ray Lewis to draft Phillips. Indianapolis Colts, Art Schlichter. In 1982, the Indianapolis Colts, then still in Baltimore, used the 4th overall pick on quarterback Art Schlichter out of Ohio State. Schlichter was a decorated college passer, setting multiple Big Ten records, and was seen as the perfect choice to stabilize the franchise. At the time, he had the size, accuracy, and mobility to fit the mold of a franchise quarterback. But Schlichter came into the NFL carrying a hidden problem, a gambling addiction that would ultimately derail his career before it really began. As a rookie, his on-field play was shaky. He threw for just 3 touchdowns against 12 interceptions, struggling to adjust to NFL defenses. But what was happening off the field was even worse. Schlichter was already deep into sports betting, and before long, his debts piled up. By his 2nd season, he was suspended for gambling, missing the entire year. Attempts to revive his career in 1984 and 1985 failed, as his addiction continued to spiral. The Colts eventually cut ties with him, and Schlichter bounced around briefly in the CFL and Arena Football League. But his NFL career was effectively over after just 13 games. His gambling issues would later lead to repeated arrests and time in prison, overshadowing whatever promise he once had as a player. Seattle Seahawks, Rick Mirer. In 1993, the Seattle Seahawks held the 2nd overall pick in the draft and selected quarterback Rick Mirer out of Notre Dame. Coming out of college, Mirer was seen as a safe bet. He had the size, leadership, and experience that teams wanted in a franchise quarterback, and Seattle believed he would finally stabilize a position that had long been a problem for the team. At first, it seemed like the pick might work. As a rookie, Meyer threw for over 2,800 yards and 12 touchdowns, setting several rookie passing marks at the time. While the Seahawks finished just 6-10, there was optimism that he was the long-term answer. But after that first season, everything fell apart. Defenses quickly figured him out, and Meyer never adjusted. His accuracy was erratic, his decision-making poor, and he became turnover-prone. In 1994, he threw for just 2,350 yards, with 11 touchdowns and 17 interceptions. The downward spiral continued, and his mechanics and confidence never recovered. By the end of his fourth season in Seattle, his record as a starter was 20-31, with more interceptions than touchdowns. The Seahawks traded him to the Chicago Bears in 1997, but he started only 3 games there and bounced around the league as a backup for several more years. He never came close to living up to the expectations of a number 2 overall pick. Pittsburgh Steelers, Huey Richardson. In 1991, the Pittsburgh Steelers used the 15th overall pick on linebacker Huey Richardson out of Florida. Richardson had been an All-American with the Gators, piling up tackles and sacks in the SEC, and Pittsburgh believed he could be the next great piece in a long tradition of dominant linebackers. At 6 feet 3 inches and nearly 250 pounds, he looked like the prototype. But once he entered the NFL, it quickly became apparent that Richardson wasn't ready for the pro game. He struggled with the transition to Pittsburgh's defensive schemes, often looking lost in coverage and ineffective as a pass rusher. His lack of explosiveness off the edge made it difficult for him to consistently beat NFL linemen, and he didn't have the instincts to make up for it. Despite being a first-round pick, Richardson barely saw the field as a rookie. The following offseason, new head coach Bill Cowher arrived, and Richardson wasn't part of his plans. After just 5 games with the Steelers, he was traded to the Washington Redskins for a 7th-round pick. He lasted 1 season there, then spent part of another with the Jets before his career was over. In total, he played only 16 games and recorded no sacks. New York Jets, Vernon Gholston. In 2008, the New York Jets had the 6th overall pick and used it on defensive end Vernon Gholston out of Ohio State. Gholston had been one of the most dominant defenders in college football, recording 14 sacks his final year and terrorizing Big Ten quarterbacks with his speed and strength. At 6 feet 3 inches and 266 pounds, he tested off the charts at the Combine, and the Jets believed they were drafting a franchise pass rusher who could anchor their defense for years. But once he reached the NFL, the dominance disappeared. Gholston never recorded a single sack in his 3 seasons with the Jets, a stunning statistic for a top 6 pick drafted to pressure the quarterback. He struggled with technique, often looking stiff coming off the edge, and he couldn't translate his raw athleticism into consistent production. Coaches tried him at both defensive end and outside linebacker, hoping a different role might unlock his potential, but nothing worked. Worse, his effort and motor were often questioned. He rarely flashed the aggressiveness he had shown at Ohio State, and on a Jets defense that demanded toughness and grit, he looked out of place. By 2011, New York cut ties, releasing him before his rookie contract was even finished. Cincinnati Bengals, Akili Smith. In 1999, the Cincinnati Bengals held the 3rd overall pick in a draft loaded with quarterback talent. With Tim Couch and Donovan McNabb already off the board, Cincinnati selected Akili Smith out of Oregon. Smith had rocketed up draft boards after a stellar senior season where he threw 32 touchdowns in just 11 games. He had size, athleticism, and a big arm, and the Bengals believed they had finally found their franchise quarterback. But the jump from college to the NFL proved overwhelming. Smith held out for a long contract negotiation and missed most of training camp as a rookie, immediately putting him behind. When he did get on the field, his rawness showed. He struggled to read defenses, held the ball too long, and his mechanics broke down under pressure. In 17 career starts with the Bengals, he threw just 5 touchdowns against 13 interceptions and completed only 47% of his passes. The situation in Cincinnati didn't help. The roster was thin, the offensive line gave him little protection, and the team was mired in one of the darkest stretches in franchise history. Still, Smith never showed the growth expected from a top 3 pick. By 2002, he was released, and after brief stints in NFL Europe and the CFL, his career was over. For the Bengals, it was another crushing blow in their long history of draft struggles. In a class that produced Donovan McNabb, Dante Culpepper, and even a Super Bowl winning quarterback in Trent Dilfer, Cincinnati was left with one of the biggest busts of the era, New Orleans Saints, Russell Erxleben. In 1979, the New Orleans Saints made one of the strangest first-round picks in NFL history. With the 11th overall selection, they drafted Russell Erxleben, a punter and kicker out of Texas. Erxleben had been a legendary specialist in college, setting NCAA records for longest field goals, including a famous 67-yarder. The Saints believed his booming leg could change games by flipping field position and adding scoring range. But the decision to spend such a high pick on a punter was questionable from the start, and the results only made it worse. In his very first NFL game, Erxleben attempted a 57-yard field goal in overtime against the Falcons. The kick went disastrously wrong, sailing wide and short, and was returned for a touchdown that ended the game. That moment set the tone for his career. He never became a reliable kicker, struggling with both accuracy and consistency. Eventually, he was relegated solely to punting duties, where he was solid but never special enough to justify being drafted in the first round. By 1983, Erxleben was out of the NFL after just 4 seasons, finishing with a career field goal percentage under 50%. In a year where future Hall of Famers like Joe Montana, Kellen Winslow, and Dan Hampton were still on the board, New Orleans spent its first rounder on a specialist who gave them little return. Las Vegas Raiders, Jamarcus Russell. In 2007, the Raiders held the first overall pick in the draft and were desperate for a franchise quarterback. They chose Jamarcus Russell out of LSU, a massive 6 feet 6 inches, 265-pound passer with one of the strongest arms scouts had ever seen. His performance in the Sugar Bowl and his cannon-like throws at the Combine made him look like a generational prospect. Al Davis believed he was the kind of player who could restore the Raiders to greatness, but Russell became the definition of a draft bust. His rookie year began with a lengthy contract holdout, keeping him out of camp and delaying his development. When he did get on the field, he showed little command of the offense. He struggled with accuracy, decision-making, and leadership. Despite his arm strength, he couldn't consistently complete the basic throws needed to keep drives alive. In 3 seasons with the Raiders, he threw just 18 touchdowns against 23 interceptions. Questions about his work ethic and preparation followed him constantly. Coaches criticized his conditioning and lack of commitment, and he became infamous for showing up overweight to team activities. By 2010, just 3 years after being drafted first overall, Oakland released him. He never played another down in the NFL. Los Angeles Chargers, Ryan Leaf. In 1998, the San Diego Chargers, now Los Angeles, held the 2nd overall pick in one of the most anticipated quarterback drafts ever. With Peyton Manning going first to the Colts, the Chargers selected Ryan Leaf out of Washington State. Leaf was a physical specimen at 6 feet 5 inches with a cannon arm, coming off a 33-touchdown season in college. Many scouts debated whether Leaf or Manning should be the first overall pick, and some believed Leaf had the higher ceiling. What followed was one of the most infamous careers in NFL history. From the start, Leaf's immaturity and lack of preparation became glaring issues. In his rookie season, he threw just 2 touchdowns against 15 interceptions, and quickly clashed with teammates, coaches, and the media. He became known for sideline outbursts, poor leadership, and a refusal to take accountability for mistakes. A memorable incident where he screamed at a reporter in the locker room further cemented his reputation. On the field, his play was even worse. Leaf finished his Chargers career with a record of 4-17 as a starter, throwing 13 touchdowns and 33 interceptions. Injuries piled on as well, including a major shoulder injury that robbed him of what little progress he was making. By 2001, just 3 years after being drafted, San Diego released him. Brief stints with the Cowboys and Seahawks went nowhere, and by 2002, his NFL career was over. In a draft where Indianapolis secured Peyton Manning, one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, San Diego walked away with one of the biggest busts in league history. If you enjoyed this, I'm going to be posting a lot here, so it would mean a lot if you subscribed. Thanks for watching. Buffalo Bills, the 4 Super Bowl losses, 1990 to 93. For Buffalo fans, nothing stings more than the early 1990s. The Bills were one of the most dominant teams of that era, reaching 4 straight Super Bowls from 1990 to 1993. Led by Jim Kelly, Thurman Thomas, Andre Reed, and Bruce Smith, they had the talent to cement themselves as a dynasty. Instead, those 4 years came to define heartbreak. The most painful of the 4 came first. On January 27, 1991, in Super Bowl 25 against the New York Giants, the Bills trailed 20-19 in the final seconds. With 8 seconds left, kicker Scott Norwood lined up for a 47-yard field goal that could have won Buffalo its first championship. The kick sailed wide right, and the Giants escaped with the victory. Wide right became the defining phrase of Bills football for a generation. The next 3 Super Bowls didn't bring redemption. Buffalo was blown out by Washington in Super Bowl 26, and then humiliated by Dallas in back-to-back years, including a 52-17 defeat in Super Bowl 27. Despite their dominance in the AFC, the Bills left the early 90s with no rings to show for it. Miami Dolphins, Super Bowl 17 collapse. For Miami fans, the early 1980s brought one of the most painful what-ifs in franchise history. The Dolphins had already been crowned Super Bowl champions in the early 1970s, during Don Shula's dynasty, and by the 1982 season, they were ready to return to glory. In Super Bowl 17 on January 30th, 1983, the Dolphins faced Washington. Miami struck first in a big way, jumping out to a 17-0 lead. Their defense, nicknamed the Killer Bees, looked dominant, and it seemed as if the Lombardi Trophy was heading back to South Florida. But then, momentum flipped. Washington chipped away at the lead, tying the game in the third quarter. Early in the fourth, with the score knotted at 17, came the play Dolphins fans still remember with a grimace. On 4th and 1, Washington running back John Riggins broke free for a 43-yard touchdown run, dragging Miami cornerback Don McNeil with him before sprinting untouched to the end zone. That run didn't just give Washington the lead, it crushed Miami's spirit. Washington scored 27 unanswered points in total, winning 27-17. The Dolphins' early lead and eventual collapse remained seared into the memory of the fan base. Losing a Super Bowl is always painful, but blowing a 2-touchdown advantage in the biggest game of the year made it devastating. For a generation of Miami fans, that loss symbolized wasted opportunity, especially since Shula wouldn't win another championship despite later drafting Dan Marino. New England Patriots, Super Bowl 42, the 18-1 season. For Patriots fans, no loss will ever sting more than February 3rd, 2008. New England entered Super Bowl 42 against the New York Giants as heavy favorites. They weren't just undefeated, they were chasing history. At 18-0, Tom Brady, Randy Moss, and Bill Belichick had put together one of the greatest seasons ever. A win would have capped off the NFL's first perfect season since the 1972 Dolphins. The game, however, didn't go according to script. The Giants' relentless pass rush harassed Brady all night, and the Patriots' offense never found its usual rhythm. Still, with just under 3 minutes left, Brady found Moss for a touchdown to take a 14-10 lead. It felt like destiny was finally within reach. But then came one of the most famous drives in NFL history. Giants quarterback Eli Manning, facing 3rd and 5, somehow escaped a sure sack and hurled a desperate pass downfield. Wide receiver David Tyree went up and made the miraculous helmet catch, pinning the ball against his helmet as Rodney Harrison dragged him down. The improbable 32-yard gain kept the drive alive. Moments later, Manning hit Plaxico Burress for the go-ahead touchdown with just 35 seconds left. The Giants won 17-14, handing the Patriots their only loss of the season on the biggest stage of all. For New England, the defeat was devastating. Instead of immortality as the greatest team ever, they became 18-1, remembered as much for falling short as for their dominance. New York Jets, the butt fumble, 2012. Thanksgiving night, November 22, 2012, became one of the most infamous evenings in Jets history. And it wasn't because of the turkey. In front of a national audience on primetime television, the Jets hosted the New England Patriots in what quickly turned into a disaster. Early in the second quarter, trailing 14-0, Jets quarterback Mark Sanchez took a snap and attempted a broken handoff. Unsure where to go, he scrambled forward, straight into the backside of his own offensive lineman, Brandon Moore. The collision knocked Sanchez to the turf, the ball popped loose, and the Patriots scooped it up for a touchdown. The play was instantly dubbed the butt fumble, and it symbolized the Jets' struggles in one humiliating moment. New England went on to rout New York 49-19 in a blowout that compounded the embarrassment. For Jets fans, the sight of their quarterback running into his own teammate's rear end and fumbling on national TV became the defining lowlight of the 2012 season. What made the butt fumble sting even more was how it lived on. ESPN replayed it for months, and it became a viral clip replayed endlessly in blooper reels. It even won Worst of the Worst on SportsCenter's Not Top 10 countdown for 40 consecutive weeks before being retired from the list. Baltimore Ravens, 2018 wildcard loss versus Chargers. For Ravens fans, the 2018 postseason was supposed to be the dawn of a new era. Rookie quarterback Lamar Jackson had electrified the league after taking over midway through the season, leading Baltimore to a 6-1 finish down the stretch and an AFC North title. With the playoffs back in Baltimore, optimism was high. On January 6, 2019, the Ravens hosted the Los Angeles Chargers in the wild card round. Having just beaten LA a few weeks earlier, many believed Baltimore's stout defense and Jackson's dynamic running would carry them to the next round. What unfolded became one of the more painful memories in recent Ravens history. The Chargers, led by veteran quarterback Philip Rivers, came prepared with a new defensive scheme. They frequently used 7 defensive backs on the field to counter Jackson's running ability, clogging up lanes and forcing him into uncomfortable passing situations. The Ravens' offense sputtered, and by the fourth quarter, they trailed 23-3. Baltimore finally mounted a rally late, as Jackson threw 2 touchdown passes to cut the lead to 23-17. With just over a minute remaining, the Ravens had the ball with a chance to complete the comeback, but Jackson was strip-sacked, and the fumble sealed the game for Los Angeles. Though Lamar Jackson would go on to win MVP the very next season, this game remains a reminder of the growing pains of that era. Cincinnati Bengals, 2015 wildcard collapse versus Steelers. Few playoff losses in NFL history have been as painful and self-inflicted as what happened to the Bengals on January 9th, 2016. Hosting the rival Pittsburgh Steelers in the wildcard round, Cincinnati was trying to end decades of frustration. They hadn't won a playoff game since 1990. This matchup seemed like the perfect chance to finally change that narrative. The game itself was an emotional roller coaster. In a cold, rainy slugfest, tempers flared from the start. Late in the fourth quarter, it looked like Cincinnati was finally about to exercise their playoff demons. Trailing 15-0 entering the fourth quarter, they stormed back. With just 1 minute and 50 seconds left to play, running back Jeremy Hill powered into the end zone to give the Bengals a 16-15 lead. When Vontaze Burfict intercepted Ben Roethlisberger shortly afterward, Paul Brown Stadium erupted. It seemed like Cincinnati had their long-awaited playoff victory secured, but in just a few minutes, it all unraveled. On the very next offensive play, Hill fumbled the ball, giving the Steelers life. Roethlisberger, injured earlier in the game, returned to lead a desperate drive. With less than 30 seconds left, Burfict delivered a crushing hit to Antonio Brown that drew a 15-yard penalty for unnecessary roughness. As if that wasn't bad enough, Bengals cornerback Adam Packman-Jones was flagged for unsportsmanlike conduct during the same sequence, handing Pittsburgh an additional 15 yards. In the blink of an eye, the Steelers were in field goal range. Kicker Chris Boswell drilled a 35-yard field goal with just 14 seconds remaining, giving Pittsburgh an improbable 18-16 win. Bengals players and fans were left stunned, watching what felt like certain victory dissolve into chaos. Cleveland Browns, The Drive. 1986 AFC Championship. For Browns fans, no moment embodies heartbreak more than The Drive. On January 11th, 1987, Cleveland hosted the Denver Broncos in the AFC Championship game at Municipal Stadium. The Browns were just minutes away from their first ever Super Bowl appearance. With just over 5 minutes left, Cleveland led 20-13. Denver quarterback John Elway and the Broncos offense took over, but they were pinned at their own 2-yard line. What happened next has haunted Cleveland for decades. Elway orchestrated a legendary 98-yard march against the Browns' defense. He converted critical third downs, scrambled to extend plays, and picked apart Cleveland with clutch throws. The defining moment came with just 37 seconds left, a touchdown pass to Mark Jackson to tie the game at 20-20. In overtime, the Broncos sealed it with a 33-yard field goal. Victory had been within reach, only to slip away in the final minutes. Pittsburgh Steelers, Super Bowl 45 loss to the Packers, 2011. For a franchise that prides itself on championship tradition, few losses cut deeper for Steelers fans than February 6th, 2011. In Super Bowl 45, Pittsburgh had the chance to add a 7th Lombardi trophy to their record collection. The opponent was the Green Bay Packers, led by Aaron Rodgers, who was still chasing his first ring. Early on, things spiraled quickly. The Packers jumped out to a 21-3 lead, capitalizing on a Ben Roethlisberger interception, returned for a touchdown and another short field score. The Steelers clawed their way back, cutting the lead to 21-17 in the third quarter. Behind Rashard Mendenhall's touchdown run, Hines Ward and Mike Wallace kept making plays. And for a moment, it looked like Pittsburgh might pull off another comeback. But disaster struck again. Early in the fourth quarter, with Pittsburgh driving, Mendenhall fumbled. Green Bay recovered, and Rodgers wasted no time capitalizing, hitting Greg Jennings for a touchdown. The Steelers couldn't recover, and despite a late score to make it close, the Packers held on for a 31-25 victory. In the years since, the Steelers haven't returned to the big game. Houston Texans, 2019 playoff collapse versus Chiefs. For Texans fans, no moment stings more than January 12, 2020, when their team suffered one of the worst collapses in playoff history. It was the AFC divisional round, and Houston was on the road in Kansas City facing Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. Early on, everything went right. The Texans stunned Arrowhead Stadium by storming out to a 24-0 lead midway through the second quarter. Deshaun Watson was making plays, the defense was forcing mistakes, and it looked like Houston was on the verge of pulling off a monumental upset that would send them to the AFC Championship game for the first time in franchise history. Then, the collapse began. The Chiefs answered with a quick touchdown and immediately followed it up by blocking a Texans punt and returning it for another score. A failed Houston fake punt gave Mahomes a short field, and soon after, the lead was gone. In just a matter of minutes, the Chiefs had turned a 24-point deficit into a halftime lead. From there, Kansas City never looked back. Mahomes threw 5 touchdown passes, and the Chiefs scored 41 unanswered points. The final score was 51-31, with Houston left stunned. One moment they were up 4 scores, and the next they were completely overwhelmed. Many considered it the franchise's defining low point, a reminder of wasted potential during the Watson era. For Kansas City, it was the beginning of a Super Bowl run. For Houston, it was the collapse that still haunts the fan base. Indianapolis Colts, Super Bowl III upset. For Colts fans, especially those who still remember the team's Baltimore days, nothing was more painful than Super Bowl III. On January 12, 1969, the Colts entered the game as overwhelming favorites against the upstart AFL champion New York Jets. Baltimore had finished the regular season 13-1 and demolished the Browns in the NFL championship game. Odds makers made them 18-point favorites, and many believed the Jets had no chance. But history had other plans. Jets quarterback Joe Namath famously guaranteed victory before the game, and his team backed it up. The Colts, led by legendary quarterback Johnny Unitas, though still recovering from injury, and Earl Morrall, looked out of sync from the start. Mistakes piled up, including costly interceptions, and Baltimore could never find its rhythm. Meanwhile, the Jets played efficient, mistake-free football. Running back Matt Snell carried 30 times for 121 yards and a touchdown, while kicker Jim Turner added 3 field goals. Namath didn't even throw a touchdown pass, but he controlled the game with confidence and precision. The final score was 16-7 Jets, a stunning upset that instantly became one of the most iconic moments in NFL history. It validated the AFL's legitimacy and set the stage for the AFL-NFL merger. For the Colts, however, it was a humiliating defeat. Instead of cementing themselves as one of the greatest teams of all time, they became the answer to a trivia question. The NFL powerhouse that got shocked by Namath's Jets. Jacksonville Jaguars. 1999 AFC Championship loss and years of futility. For Jaguars fans, the high watermark of the franchise came shockingly early, and the fall from it has been long and painful. Founded as an expansion team in 1995, Jacksonville quickly found success under head coach Tom Coughlin, making the playoffs 4 times in their first 5 years. By the 1999 season, they looked unstoppable. The Jaguars finished 14-2, boasting the NFL's best record, powered by quarterback Mark Brunell, running back Fred Taylor, and a ferocious defense led by Tony Brackens and Kevin Hardy. They won their 2 playoff games handily, setting up an AFC Championship showdown against the Tennessee Titans, a team they had lost to twice that regular season. Fans believed this was finally their year, but in front of a raucous Jacksonville crowd on January 23, 2000, disaster struck. After holding a slim halftime lead, the Jaguars completely unraveled. Titans quarterback Steve McNair and running back Eddie George dominated the second half, and special teams icon Derek Mason broke free for a kickoff return touchdown. The Titans outscored Jacksonville 23-0 in the second half, winning 33-14. The pain was doubled by context. Jacksonville's magical season ended against the one team they couldn't beat, Tennessee. In fact, all 3 of their losses that season came to the Titans. What made this loss so devastating is what followed. Jacksonville didn't return to the AFC Championship for over 17 years, enduring long stretches of losing seasons, coaching changes, and roster rebuilds. The franchise even hit rock bottom in 2020 with a 1-15 record, the worst in team history. Tennessee Titans, Super Bowl 34, 1 yard short. Few moments in NFL history capture heartbreak more perfectly than the ending of Super Bowl 34. On January 30th, 2000, the Tennessee Titans, just a year removed from being the Houston Oilers, had a chance to make history. Behind quarterback Steve McNair and running back Eddie George, the Titans rallied from a 16-point deficit against the high-powered St. Louis Rams, known as the greatest show on turf. With just 6 seconds left, Tennessee trailed 23-16 and had the ball on the Rams' 10-yard line. McNair fired a quick slant pass to wide receiver Kevin Dyson. Dyson caught it in stride and sprinted toward the end zone. For a split second, it looked like the Titans were about to tie the game and send it to overtime. But Rams linebacker Mike Jones made a perfect game-saving tackle. He wrapped Dyson just short of the goal line, dragging him down at the 1-yard line as time expired. The image of Dyson stretching his arm desperately toward the end zone, falling just shy, remains one of the most iconic visuals in Super Bowl history. The Titans lost 23-16. For the franchise, it was both a breakthrough and a heartbreak. Their first Super Bowl appearance, decided by literal inches. For fans, the pain has lingered for decades. Tennessee has made playoff runs since, but has never returned to the Super Bowl. Denver Broncos, Super Bowl 48 blowout versus Seahawks. For Broncos fans, the memory of February 2nd, 2014 remains a painful one. Denver entered Super Bowl 48 in New Jersey with one of the most prolific offenses the NFL had ever seen. Peyton Manning had just broken single-season records for passing yards, 5,477, and touchdowns, 55. The Broncos finished 13-3, steamrolled the AFC, and were favored to take home the Lombardi Trophy. But against the Seattle Seahawks, it all went wrong from the very first play. On the game's opening snap, a miscommunication on the offensive line led to the ball sailing past Manning into the end zone for a safety. Just 12 seconds into the game, Denver trailed 2-0, and things unraveled from there. Seattle's ferocious Legion of Boom defense overwhelmed Manning and the Broncos receivers, suffocating an offense that had looked unstoppable all season. By halftime, it was 22-0. Percy Harvin returned the second-half kickoff 87 yards for a touchdown, and Seattle never looked back. At one point, the Seahawks led 36-0, completely dominating all 3 phases of the game. The final score was 43-8. One of the most lopsided results in Super Bowl history. For Denver, it was an embarrassment. not just a loss, but a complete dismantling on the biggest stage, with the whole country watching. Broncos fans had endured blowout defeats in earlier Super Bowls in the 1980s, but this one was different. Kansas City Chiefs, Super Bowl, 1 loss to the Packers. For the Kansas City Chiefs, the roots of their fan base's pain stretch all the way back to the very first Super Bowl. On January 15, 1967, the Chiefs, champions of the AFL, faced Vince Lombardi's Green Bay Packers, champions of the NFL, in the inaugural AFL-NFL World Championship game, what would soon be known as the Super Bowl. At the time, many NFL loyalists viewed the AFL as inferior. Chiefs fans believed their team, led by quarterback Len Dawson, running back Mike Garrett, and defensive stars like Bobby Bell and Buck Buchanan, could prove otherwise. In the first half, Kansas City actually kept pace. They trailed just 14-10 at halftime, and momentum seemed within reach. But the second half belonged to Green Bay. Dawson was intercepted by Willie Wood early in the third quarter, setting up a Packers touchdown. From there, the floodgates opened. Bart Starr, the Packers' legendary quarterback, controlled the game with efficiency, while Green Bay's defense completely shut down Kansas City's explosive offense. The Packers ran away with it, winning 35-10. For Chiefs fans, it was painful not just because of the loss, but because of what it represented. Their team had been carrying the flag for the AFL, and the defeat only fueled the perception that the AFL wasn't on the same level as the NFL. The sting lingered until the Chiefs redeemed themselves 3 years later, beating the Minnesota Vikings in Super Bowl IV. Las Vegas Raiders, franchise relocations. For Raiders fans, some of the most painful moments haven't come on the field. They've come from watching their team move away. Few franchises in sports have such a complicated relationship with their cities, and few fan bases have felt that heartbreak more than the Raiders. The story begins in Oakland, where the Raiders were founded in 1960 as a charter member of the AFL. The team quickly became known for its rebellious identity, with Al Davis building a culture of toughness and swagger. The Raiders built one of the most loyal fan bases in the NFL, Raider Nation, deeply rooted in the East Bay. But in 1982, Davis relocated the team to Los Angeles. For Oakland fans, it was devastating. The Silver and Black became an LA team, winning Super Bowl XVIII just 2 years later, in 1984. While Los Angeles embraced the team, many Oakland fans felt abandoned, left behind, despite decades of loyalty. In 1995, the Raiders returned to Oakland after 13 years in LA. The reunion was emotional. Raider Nation had its team back, and the Coliseum again became home to the league's rowdiest fans. For a time, it seemed the wounds had healed, but financial disputes, stadium issues, and the lure of a bigger market eventually led to another painful move. In 2020, the Raiders relocated again, this time to Las Vegas. The move was a crushing blow for Oakland, a city that had already lost the Warriors to San Francisco, and was watching the A's explore leaving as well. Raider Nation remains fiercely loyal, traveling in droves to Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas, but the move left Oakland fans heartbroken for a second time. Dallas Cowboys, the Ice Bowl. For Cowboys fans, few games in franchise history sting more than the legendary Ice Bowl. On December 31st, 1967, Dallas faced the Green Bay Packers at Lambeau Field in the NFL Championship. A trip to Super Bowl II was on the line, and the conditions were brutal. The temperature at kickoff was minus 15 degrees Fahrenheit, minus 26 degrees Celsius, with a wind chill near minus 50 degrees Fahrenheit, making it one of the coldest games ever played in NFL history. The Cowboys, led by quarterback Don Meredith and head coach Tom Landry, battled Green Bay's dynasty team, led by Vince Lombardi. It was a defensive struggle on frozen turf, with players slipping on ice and breath turning instantly to frost. Late in the fourth quarter, Dallas mounted a drive and took a 17-14 lead after a touchdown pass by Dan Reeves. It looked like the Cowboys might finally overcome Green Bay and advance to their first Super Bowl. But Packers quarterback Bart Starr engineered one of the most famous drives in football history. With just seconds left and the ball at the 1-yard line, Starr executed a quarterback sneak behind guard Jerry Kramer, plunging into the end zone for the winning touchdown. Green Bay won 21-17, and the Cowboys' championship hopes were frozen on the goal line. The image of Starr diving into the end zone remains iconic, but for Cowboys fans, it's a snapshot of one of the most painful defeats in team history. New York Giants, the miracle at the Meadowlands. For Giants fans, the single most painful and embarrassing moment in franchise history came on December 10th, 1978, in what became known as the Miracle at the Meadowlands. The Giants were hosting their division rival Philadelphia Eagles at Giants Stadium. With less than 30 seconds left, New York held a 17-12 lead. Philadelphia had no timeouts remaining, meaning all the Giants had to do was kneel and run out the clock. Victory was secure, or so it seemed. Instead, Giants offensive coordinator Bob Gibson called for a running play, and quarterback Joe Pisarcik attempted to hand off to running back Larry Csonka. The exchange went horribly wrong. Pisarcik fumbled the handoff, and Eagles cornerback Herman Edwards scooped up the loose ball. He sprinted 26 yards untouched into the end zone for the winning touchdown. In a matter of seconds, the Giants went from certain victory to a 19-17 defeat. The play was immediately infamous, with Giants fans in disbelief at how their team had managed to lose. It became a turning point not just for the franchise, but for the NFL as a whole. The embarrassment was so complete that the Giants' coaching staff was overhauled, and the play directly influenced the league-wide adoption of the victory formation, the quarterback kneel down we see today to safely end games. Philadelphia Eagles, Super Bowl 39 loss to the Patriots. For Eagles fans, the pain of February 6, 2005 still lingers. After years of near misses under head coach Andy Reid and quarterback Donovan McNabb, Philadelphia had finally broken through to reach Super Bowl 39. With stars like wide receiver Terrell Owens, who was playing heroically just weeks after breaking his leg, and safety Brian Dawkins, this felt like the Eagles' moment to bring home their first Lombardi trophy. Facing Tom Brady and the New England Patriots dynasty, the game was tightly contested. Philadelphia's defense kept them in it, forcing New England to grind for every yard. By the third quarter, the Eagles actually held a lead. For a fan base starved for a championship, the dream was alive. But then, the tide turned. The Patriots rallied, scoring 10 straight points to take a 24-14 lead in the fourth quarter. McNabb responded with a touchdown to cut it to 24-21, but the Eagles' offense struggled with pace, criticized afterward for huddling and moving too slowly in crunch time. On their final drive, McNabb threw an interception that sealed the game, and Philadelphia's title hopes slipped away. The loss was devastating because the Eagles had been so close. They had finally cleared the hurdle of NFC Championship heartbreak, losing 3 straight from 2001 to 2003, only to fall short on the biggest stage. Owens' valiant effort, 9 catches for 122 yards on an injured leg, became legendary. But it wasn't enough. Washington Commanders, Super Bowl 18, humiliation. For Washington fans, the bitterest defeat came on January 22, 1984, in Super Bowl 18 against the Los Angeles Raiders. The year before, Washington had won Super Bowl 17 and returned as defending champions after a record-setting 1983 season in which they went 14-2 and set the then NFL record for points scored, 541. Led by head coach Joe Gibbs, quarterback Joe Theismann, and running back John Riggins, they were heavy favorites. Instead, the game turned into a nightmare. The Raiders stunned Washington with big plays from the start. The defining moment came late in the first half. With Washington backed up at its own 12-yard line and trailing 14-3, Theismann's screen pass was intercepted by linebacker Jack Squirek, who walked untouched into the end zone for a pick six. That gave Los Angeles a 21-3 halftime lead and completely broke Washington's spirit. Things only got worse after halftime. Raiders running back Marcus Allen delivered one of the most iconic plays in Super Bowl history, reversing field on a broken run and sprinting 74 yards for a touchdown. By the time it was over, the Raiders had routed Washington 38-9, one of the most lopsided Super Bowl defeats ever. Chicago Bears, Super Bowl 41 loss to the Colts. For Bears fans, February 4th, 2007 was supposed to be a night of celebration, their first Super Bowl appearance since the dominant 1985 championship team. Head coach Lovie Smith had led Chicago to a 13-3 record, and the defense, anchored by Brian Urlacher, Lance Briggs, and Charles Tillman, looked like one of the league's best. The Bears also had Devin Hester, the most dangerous return man in football, who had electrified the league all season. Super Bowl 41 in Miami started perfectly. On the opening kickoff, Hester took the ball back 92 yards for a touchdown, becoming the first player in Super Bowl history to return the opening kick for a score. Bears fans erupted, dreaming of a magical night. But after that, things fell apart. Rain poured down, creating slick conditions, and quarterback Rex Grossman struggled. Though the Bears kept it close through the first half, trailing just 22-17 in the third quarter, their offense stalled completely after halftime. Grossman threw 2 costly interceptions, including one returned for a touchdown by Kelvin Hayden that sealed the game. Meanwhile, Peyton Manning and the Indianapolis Colts slowly wore down the Bears' defense. Manning, who had faced criticism for playoff struggles, finally delivered, completing 25 passes for 247 yards and a touchdown. The Colts controlled the ball, controlled the clock, and pulled away for a 29-17 victory. For Chicago fans, the pain came from the sense of a wasted opportunity. The defense was championship caliber. Many still view it as the Bears' best chance at another Super Bowl title in the modern era, only to watch it slip away in frustrating fashion. The Bears haven't returned to the Super Bowl since. Detroit Lions, the 0-16 season. For Lions fans, the low point of the franchise came in 2008, when Detroit became the first team in NFL history to finish a season 0-16. The Lions entered the year with little optimism after years of poor drafts and losing records, but no one imagined just how bad things would get. Quarterbacks Dan Orlovsky, John Kitna, and Dante Culpepper all took turns starting, and the offense sputtered while the defense collapsed week after week. There were moments of near relief, a couple of games where the Lions were competitive late, but each time they found a way to lose. One of the season's defining lowlights came in Week 6 against the Vikings, when Orlovsky, scrambling in his own end zone, accidentally ran out of bounds, stepping on the back line for a safety. It became an infamous clip, replayed as a symbol of the Lions' futility. By the end of December, Detroit had lost all 16 games, often by blowout margins. The final record, 0-16, with opponents outscoring them by over 250 points. It was the first winless season in modern NFL history and set a standard of futility no fan base wants to endure. The humiliation ran deep. Longtime fans, who had already endured decades without a championship, were forced to live through a season where their team couldn't manage a single win. Ownership and management faced immense backlash, and the franchise had to completely reset. Green Bay Packers, 2007 NFC Championship loss to the Giants. For Packers fans, January 20th, 2008 remains one of the coldest and most painful nights in Lambeau Field history. Green Bay hosted the New York Giants in the NFC Championship game, with the winner heading to Super Bowl 42. It was bitterly cold, with the temperature at kickoff of frigid -1 degrees Fahrenheit, and the wind chill plunging to -23 degrees Fahrenheit. The Packers had been revitalized that season behind quarterback Brett Favre, who seemed to be writing one last great chapter in his storied Green Bay career. Facing Eli Manning and the underdog Giants, the Packers were favored to win at home in the brutal conditions. But the game turned into a slugfest. The Giants controlled the line of scrimmage, pounding the ball with running backs Brandon Jacobs and Ahmad Bradshaw, while Manning, despite the weather, played mistake-free football. Favre and the Packers kept it close. With the score tied 20-20 late in the fourth quarter, the Giants had 2 chances to win it with field goals, but kicker Lawrence Tynes missed both, sending the game to overtime. In OT, Packers fans believed Favre would deliver another Lambeau miracle. Instead, disaster struck. On Green Bay's first possession, Favre threw an interception to Corey Webster, giving the Giants the ball deep in Packers territory. This time, Tynes didn't miss. His 47-yard field goal sailed through the uprights, giving New York a stunning 23-20 victory. The loss crushed Green Bay. It ended Favre's tenure with the Packers. He would be traded months later to the Jets, and robbed the franchise of what felt like a golden Super Bowl opportunity. Adding to the sting, the Giants went on to shock the undefeated Patriots in the Super Bowl, a chance that many Packers fans believed could have been theirs. Minnesota Vikings, 1998 NFC Championship missed kick. For Vikings fans, no single moment captures heartbreak more than January 17, 1999, in the NFC Championship game against the Atlanta Falcons. The 1998 Vikings had been historic. They went 15-1, set a then NFL record with 556 points scored, and featured a high-powered offense with Randall Cunningham, Chris Carter, and rookie phenom Randy Moss. Many believed this was the year Minnesota would finally break through to win its first Super Bowl. Hosting the Falcons at the Metrodome, the Vikings led for much of the game. Late in the fourth quarter, ahead 27-20, they had a chance to seal the victory with a field goal. Kicker Gary Anderson, who had been perfect all season, 35 of 35 on field goals, lined up for a 38-yarder that would have given Minnesota a 10-point lead with less than 3 minutes to play. Anderson's kick sailed wide left. It was his first and only miss of the season, and it couldn't have come at a worse time. The Falcons seized the momentum, driving down the field to tie the game at 27-27. In overtime, Atlanta kicker Morton Anderson hit the game winner, sending the Falcons to the Super Bowl and leaving the Vikings stunned. For Minnesota fans, the pain of that miss is still raw. The 1998 Vikings were arguably the best team in franchise history, and yet they never got the chance to play for the Lombardi Trophy. Instead, they were remembered for one of the most infamous missed kicks in NFL history. Atlanta Falcons, the 28-3 collapse. For Falcons fans, there is no scar deeper than February 5th, 2017. In Super Bowl 51, Atlanta faced Tom Brady and the New England Patriots. For nearly 3 quarters, it looked like the franchise was about to win its first Lombardi Trophy in stunning fashion. Midway through the third quarter, the Falcons led 28-3. Quarterback Matt Ryan was playing brilliantly. The defense was forcing turnovers, and running backs Devontae Freeman and Tevin Coleman were gashing New England. With just over 20 minutes left in the game, Falcons fans were already daring to celebrate. But then came the collapse, the most infamous in NFL history. Brady led the Patriots on one scoring drive after another, while Atlanta's offense inexplicably stalled. Critical mistakes doomed the Falcons. A missed block that led to a Ryan strip sack, questionable play calling that took them out of field goal range when a simple kick might have sealed the game, and a defense that couldn't get off the field. New England stormed back, scoring 25 unanswered points to tie the game at 28-28, forcing the first overtime in Super Bowl history. By then, momentum was completely gone. The Patriots won the coin toss, drove straight down the field, and James White scored the game-winning touchdown. Final score, 34-28 Patriots. Atlanta became the punchline of NFL jokes, forever tied to the number 28-3. Carolina Panthers, Super Bowl 50 loss to the Broncos. For Panthers fans, the most painful moment came on February 7, 2016, in Super Bowl 50. Carolina had just finished a magical 2015 season, going 15-1 behind MVP quarterback Cam Newton. They had the league's number, one offense, a dominant defense led by Luke Kuechly and Josh Norman, and a swagger that made them look unstoppable. Many believed it was finally the year the Panthers would hoist their first Lombardi Trophy. But on the game's biggest stage, their dream unraveled. Facing Peyton Manning and the Denver Broncos, the Panthers were smothered by Denver's relentless pass rush. Von Miller and the Broncos' defense overwhelmed Carolina's offensive line, sacking Newton 7 times and forcing multiple turnovers. The defining play came in the fourth quarter. With Carolina trailing 16-10, Newton dropped back to pass and was stripped by Miller. As the ball bounced on the turf, Newton hesitated and didn't dive on it. Denver recovered, scored shortly after, and effectively put the game out of reach. That moment, Newton's hesitation, became the lasting image of the night, unfairly overshadowing the incredible season he had put together. The Broncos went on to win 24-10, and Carolina's historic run ended in disappointment. For fans, it was crushing, not just because of the loss, but because of how dominant the team had been all season, only to collapse when it mattered most. New Orleans Saints, the 2018 NFC Championship no call. For Saints fans, no moment in franchise history has ever felt as cruel as what happened on January 20th, 2019 in the NFC Championship game against the Los Angeles Rams. With a trip to the Super Bowl on the line, New Orleans had battled all season behind Drew Brees, Michael Thomas, and Alvin Kamara, earning the #1 seed, 1 seed and home field advantage at the raucous Superdome. Late in the fourth quarter, with the score tied 20-20, the Saints were driving into field goal range. On 3rd and 10, Brees threw toward receiver Tommy Lee Lewis, who was leveled by Rams cornerback Nicole Roby-Coleman well before the ball arrived. It was an obvious case of pass interference, helmet-to-helmet contact with no attempt to play the ball. But the officials never threw a flag. The no call forced New Orleans to settle for a field goal, giving them a 23-20 lead with less than 2 minutes left. The Rams tied the game on their next drive and eventually won 26-23 in overtime on a 57-yard field goal by Greg Zuerlein. The aftermath was immediate and furious. Saints fans were outraged, flooding the NFL with complaints. Even neutral viewers agreed it was one of the most blatant missed calls in league history. The play sparked lawsuits in New Orleans, mass protests by Saints fans, and endless debate across the sports world. The NFL later admitted the officials missed the call, and in response, the league temporarily allowed pass interference to be reviewable by replay, a rule change that was directly born from this moment. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the 0-26 start. For Buccaneers fans, the team's painful beginning still stands as the ultimate low point. When the franchise joined the NFL in 1976, optimism ran high that expansion football would bring excitement to Tampa Bay. Instead, it brought misery. The Buccaneers lost all 14 games in their inaugural 1976 season, setting a record for futility. They didn't just lose, they were dominated. The offense failed to score a single touchdown until Week 4, and the team was shut out 5 times. Head coach John McKay, who had come from powerhouse USC, grew so frustrated he delivered cutting one-liners to the media, famously saying, "I'm in favor of it," when asked about his team's execution. The struggles carried into 1977. Tampa Bay started the year with 12 more losses, stretching their losing streak to 26 consecutive games, still the longest in NFL history. Fans grew used to heartbreak week after week, and the Bucs became the league's punching bag. Finally, on December 11th, 1977, Tampa Bay broke through, defeating the New Orleans Saints 33-14. Players carried McKay off the field, and fans celebrated as if they had just won the Super Bowl. But the scars of those 2 seasons lingered, defining the team's early reputation. Arizona Cardinals, Super Bowl 43, lost to the Steelers. For Cardinals fans, the most painful moment in team history came on February 1st, 2009, in Super Bowl 43. After decades of being one of the league's least successful franchises, Arizona had finally broken through behind quarterback Kurt Warner and star wide receiver Larry Fitzgerald. With a high-powered offense and a Cinderella playoff run, the Cardinals reached their first Super Bowl, facing the Pittsburgh Steelers. For much of the game, Pittsburgh controlled the tempo, highlighted by linebacker James Harrison's 100-yard interception return just before halftime, still the longest play in Super Bowl history. But the Cardinals refused to quit. In the fourth quarter, Warner found Fitzgerald on a quick slant, and Fitzgerald raced 64 yards down the middle of the field for a touchdown, giving Arizona a 23-20 lead with just 2:37 left. The Cardinals were minutes away from pulling off a shocking victory and securing the franchise's first championship. But Steelers quarterback Ben Roethlisberger engineered one of the greatest drives in Super Bowl history. With less than a minute remaining, he found Santonio Holmes in the corner of the end zone for a toe-tap touchdown, putting Pittsburgh ahead, 27-23. The Cardinals' final possession came up short, and the dream was over. Los Angeles Rams, Super Bowl 53, lost to the Patriots. For Rams fans, the most painful moment came on February 3, 2019 in Super Bowl 53. Sean McVay's young, innovative team had stormed to a 13-3 record behind quarterback Jared Goff, running back Todd Gurley, and the NFL's highest-scoring offense. The defense was anchored by Aaron Donald and Ndamukong Suh. Hopes were sky-high that this would be the Rams' coronation, with a chance to defeat Tom Brady and the New England Patriots on the biggest stage. Instead, the game turned into one of the ugliest and most frustrating Super Bowls ever played. The Patriots completely neutralized the Rams' offense, holding them scoreless until late in the fourth quarter. Goff looked overwhelmed, and Gurley, battling a mysterious knee issue, was a non-factor. For 3 quarters, the Rams couldn't generate anything, with drive after drive ending in punts. New England didn't fare much better, but in the fourth quarter, Brady finally broke through, connecting with Rob Gronkowski on a key pass that set up the game's only touchdown. The Rams' last chance ended with Goff throwing an interception, sealing a 13-3 Patriots victory. This was a team built on explosive offense and creativity, yet on the biggest stage, they managed just 3 points, the lowest total in Super Bowl history. What had been billed as a showcase of McVay's genius became instead a humbling reminder of how far the team still had to go. The sting was made worse by the context. The Rams had reached the Super Bowl thanks to a controversial NFC Championship win over the Saints, remembered for the infamous no call. Many outside fans believed the Rams didn't even deserve to be there, and their flat performance in the Super Bowl seemed to reinforce that narrative. San Francisco 49ers, Super Bowl 47 loss to the Ravens. For 49ers fans, the most painful modern moment came on February 3, 2013, in Super Bowl 47 against the Baltimore Ravens. After a decade of struggles, San Francisco had returned to glory under head coach Jim Harbaugh. With young quarterback Colin Kaepernick taking the league by storm and a defense led by stars like Patrick Willis and Navarro Bowman, the Niners were on the brink of a 6th Lombardi trophy. But in New Orleans, things spiraled quickly. The Ravens raced out to a 28-6 lead early in the third quarter, with Joe Flacco throwing 3 first-half touchdown passes. Just when it seemed hopeless, the stadium lights infamously went out, delaying the game for over 30 minutes. The power outage seemed to flip the momentum, and the 49ers roared back. Kaepernick led a furious rally, throwing for 302 yards and rushing for 62 more, including a 15-yard touchdown run that cut the deficit to 31-29. With less than 2 minutes left, San Francisco drove deep into Ravens territory. On 4th and goal from the 5-yard line, Kaepernick lofted a fade toward Michael Crabtree. The pass fell incomplete after heavy contact from Baltimore's secondary, but no flag was thrown. The Ravens held on for a 34-31 victory. For 49ers fans, the heartbreak was twofold. Not only had they fallen just 5 yards short of tying or winning the game, but the controversy over the no call on Crabtree's target left many convinced they had been robbed of a fair shot. The power outage Super Bowl became a bitter memory, a game that slipped away despite an epic comeback. Seattle Seahawks, Super Bowl 49, goal line interception. For Seahawks fans, no moment is more gut-wrenching than the ending of Super Bowl 49 on February 1st, 2015. Seattle was on the verge of winning back-to-back championships. They had dominated the NFC for 2 straight years, behind the Legion of Boom defense, Marshawn Lynch's power running, and Russell Wilson's playmaking. After dismantling Denver the year before in Super Bowl 48, they were seconds away from securing dynasty status. Facing the New England Patriots, the game was a classic back-and-forth battle. With less than a minute left, the Seahawks trailed 28-24, but had driven deep into Patriots territory. After an unbelievable juggling catch by Jermaine Kearse at the 5-yard line, Seattle had 1st and goal from the 1 with just 26 seconds remaining. Everyone expected the ball to go to Marshawn Lynch, one of the most feared short-yardage runners in NFL history. Instead, offensive coordinator Darrell Bevell called a quick slant pass. Wilson dropped back and fired toward Ricardo Lockett, but Patriots rookie cornerback Malcolm Butler jumped the route, intercepting the ball at the goal line and sealing the game for New England. The play shocked the football world. The Seahawks had victory in their grasp, only to lose in one of the most dramatic finishes in Super Bowl history. For Seattle fans, the pain was unbearable. The decision not to hand the ball to Lynch has been debated endlessly, and the interception became the defining moment of what could have been a dynasty. Seattle hasn't returned to the Super Bowl since, and that single play continues to haunt the fan base. Los Angeles Chargers, 2006, AFC Divisional Playoff Collapse versus Patriots. For Chargers fans, the 2006 playoffs are remembered as the ultimate what-if moment, a collapse that still stings nearly 2 decades later. That season, San Diego looked unstoppable, led by MVP running back LaDainian Tomlinson, who set an NFL record with 31 touchdowns. The Chargers went 14-2, the best record in franchise history. With home field advantage throughout the playoffs, many believe this was finally the year the Chargers would break through and reach the Super Bowl. On January 14, 2007, the Chargers hosted Tom Brady and the New England Patriots in the divisional round. Early on, San Diego controlled the game, forcing turnovers and building a lead. Midway through the fourth quarter, the Chargers led 21-13 and appeared to have the game all but locked up when safety Marlon McCree intercepted Brady with just over 6 minutes left. But disaster struck. Instead of going down and securing possession, McCree attempted to return the interception and fumbled. The Patriots recovered, keeping their drive alive. Moments later, Brady threw a touchdown pass and a 2-point conversion to tie the game. The Chargers' offense sputtered, and New England kicked a late field goal to go ahead. A desperate final drive ended with a missed long field goal, sealing a 24-21 Patriots victory. For fans, the loss was gut-wrenching because it felt like a golden opportunity wasted. The Chargers had the league MVP, a stacked roster, and the top seed, but costly mistakes and undisciplined play cost them the game. Even worse, the defeat led to the firing of head coach Marty Schottenheimer, who had just delivered the best regular season in team history. If you enjoyed this, I'm going to be posting a lot here, so it would mean a lot if you subscribed. Thanks for watching.